Importantly, it could limit the time it takes to call the banners by multiple days or even weeks. The riverlands are weak and pacified now, as is the rest of the south. I hold no illusions that this will always be the case. Reinforcements would almost always have to come from the north, and better connections for some of my strongest and slowest bannermen to rally would be invaluable. Dustin looked up at him, a little surprised, but nodded and took another look at the plans. Taking those things into account, it would indeed be a no-brainer to go through with this. However, can the Crown afford this? I have put 250,000 golden wolves aside for the projects. This will cover the parts of the roadway that are in Stark lands, as well as all the large and small bridges necessary. For the rest of the roadway I will be looking for aid from the local lords as well. He responded. That could work, but there is one big problem. We will be asking a lot of these lords, and they have projects of their own as well. The Karstarks and Umbers wish to improve trade with the Skaga Sea. They will need to improve docks, build extra ships and provide roads to harbors to transport the goods. If we take away their coins with this, it could have the effect of cancelling those other plans when I had planned of stimulating them as well. He thought on that for a while, as he caressed his beard. You are right. I plan to go through with these anyway, but I might have to move along the timetable for them. I will have to discuss this further with Lords Bolton and Karstark, maybe even some of their vassals directly influenced by this project. For now, I would like you to make concrete plans for the parts of the roadway that runs through my lands and the building of a larger stone bridge across the White Knife. House Stark will lead by example, and that roadway could help achieve parts of our goals either way. Roderick agreed with that and made some notes. I have one more idea that could greatly benefit the north and travel time by land. He continued when he was ready. He asked. A coastal road connecting White Harbor with Widow's Watch. It will pass Old Castle, Ramsgate and Blackpool. It will help trade and prosperity in the area, help with mobilizing troops and better White Harbor's position in the area. That is a very good idea. I will write it down. He responded, as he wrote about it in his notes. Together they talked about the details for a while, before moving on. To end the idea of road building, I have made a list of roads to start thinking about improving in the coming decades, especially next summer. He slid the scroll over so he could read it himself. Dreadfort, passing Hornwood to White Harbor. Dreadfort to Last Hearth. Hornwood to Ramsgate. Hornwood to Winterfell. Torrens Square to Deepwood Motte. Deepwood Motte to the Shadow Tower. Torrens Square to the Rills. A road through Cracklaw Point. From the Twins through Seaguard to Riverrun. They talked a little about the benefits of each road. He agreed with the list and they put it away. He pulled out some other papers about other subjects he wanted to discuss. As you know, the works in Winterfell have started. All nooks and crannies in the walls are being filled in, the hinges of the gates and doors checked and the roofs restored. It sounds more work than it actually is, but now that Winterfell is the capital of a multinational kingdom which will often house foreign diplomats, I want it to be in the best shape. Works on the first keep will soon commence too. The fortress will be restored and will house a guard's barrack, many rooms for visiting nobles and foreign dignitaries and servants' quarters. In time, the broken tower next to it will be reconstructed as well and be renamed the Grey Tower. It will house my Kingsguard, their squires, their armory and all their belongings. Roderick nodded, as he already knew that. What you may not know is that I have recently made an agreement with MYR under the impulse of my queen. They have agreed to a trade of glass for timber. The glass will be used to enlarge the glass gardens. Its area will be doubled to ensure a supply of fresh food inside the castle. Houses Karstark, Umber, Hornwood, Marndale, Sewin, Bolton and Whitefee have made similar deals with them. House Dustin has not. They asked in surprise. No, Lady Dustin did not seem to be excited about it. He replied. I will write to her again. I don't agree with that assessment. The man responded without hesitation and he nodded supportingly. He would always encourage more development of the north. You have set aside 1,000,000 golden dragons to build keeps in your realm. Your brother John, Roderick Umber, Sir Corlys Menning, Sir Harry Parrell and Sir Harry Rivers have been the recipients of most of that coin. The work on your brother's lands is going well, as you know. The last castle on the remnants of the Wisniew's hill is progressing slowly, but surely. His advisor started. The keep will be finished before long, after which a new curtain wall will have to be erected around it. Sir Harry Rivers has built a stout wooden keep and managed to fortify the bridge over the Blackwater, whilst a small town of 5,000 to 6,000 has successfully developed underneath it. He is looking at starting the construction of a stone keep instead this summer, and in the future he wants to wall the town to better defend it from threats from the south. Lords Manning and Parrell had both chosen large holdfasts along the Gold Road as their keeps. They have been expanding the holdfasts with larger halls, curtain walls and the like. In time, the old holdfasts will serve as keeps for their castles. Peace has successfully returned to the area, and two large villages of mixed Riverlander, Crownlander and Reachman population have sprung up next to their seats. He concluded, and he thanked his advisor for the update. Most of the budget for those is gone, although the efforts are clearly bearing fruit. However, I would wish to propose a change to your plans. Roderick told him. What change? He asked. You have another 500,000 golden wolves set aside for those works in the future, as well as the expansion of keeps on the eastern and western borders of the Riverlands. Another 500,000 in loans will also be made available, you wrote in your notes. I did. The 4 keeps in the Riverlands will protect its southern flank, whilst John and House Shield will protect the north's western coast. Yet, the Riverlands has shown itself weak from the west, and the east doesn't look much better. He replied. I agree, but I think that on the short term that money can be used more wisely, Your Grace. He motioned to his vassal to elaborate. The Arryns are our staunch allies for now, whilst the Lannisters are in no shape or form to propose any real threat. Anything they try the next decade will result in the destruction of the Westerlands, and they know this. They see the work already being done on their southeastern flank along the Gold Road, and this will deter them further. I would propose to keep the loans as to promote lords to strengthen their lands themselves, especially houses Mouton, Cox, Roger, both Vances and Piper, to rightfully strengthen the borders on both flanks. Nevertheless, I do believe that 500,000 could be spent now to help develop the economy everywhere in your lands. The Riverlands are still ridden with the scars of the war, whilst parts of the north are suffering from decades of low to no investments. I am listening. He replied. I would propose that we invest it in small, but noticeable changes. Concretely, I would propose investing in a small port each on Skagos and the Stony Shore. Give extra money to Maidenpool, Stony September, Fairmarket and Solpans to help with permanently settling and integrating the influx of refugees from King's Landing. They will be the backbone of our economic system in the Riverlands. The faster they recover, the faster we will start making money again there. Interesting ideas. Anything else? I would look into Sir Harry Rivers' lands. He has done his best, but between building a brand new keep, settling thousands of refugees, fortifying the crossing and winning over the local population, he simply doesn't have enough coin. The spoils of war we gave him are all but spent, and the Brackens have subsidized him far less than we expected to prioritize reconstruction of their own lands. In its current state, his lands are nothing more than an inconvenience for an invading army. The bridge is fortified, yes, but that will not hold for more than a day or two. His wooden keep is weak, and his town is without any defenses. These lands are definitely the weakest link in the south, and you can be sure that the Tyrells already know this. Roderick explained. Very well, but what to prioritize? He answered. Sir Harry has done good work with integrating and housing the refugees, as well as winning over much of the locals. Partly because of the food shipments he received from you from the Reach war reparations. His work on the bridge is also admirable. I would propose subsidizing parts needed for a stone curtain wall around the town. Have it built with enough room to expand the town to 10,000 people in the future. We cannot give the full amount necessary, but we can give more than enough to have the works start in earnest. Most of the stone can easily be shipped on barges from the ruins of King's Landing. Very well, I accept your plans. Nevertheless, I have some doubts. Wouldn't we be underinvesting in the Western Riverlands? He asked. A little, but it seems necessary as greater gain can be made elsewhere. Besides, the upcoming royal progress will be making up for a lot of it, I think. Once they see you, the Queen, the Crown Prince and the Princess, they will be quickly won over. His advisor smiled at him. I surely hope so. He smiled back. He thought about the progress they would be taking. In a few months, he and his family would march south along the King's Road and visit all his vassals east of the Green Fork including House Free. After that, they would stop at Harroway's Town, Dare, and from there go to Maidenpool and visit all the lords of Cracklaw Point, before making their way to the Blackwater. From there, they would march along it, visiting his border settlements in the process. At last, they would turn north to Stony September along the beginnings of the new road towards the Reach, before visiting Pink Maiden, Wayfarer's Rest, Atranta, Stonehenge and others on their way to Riverrun. In the end, they would go north by way of Blackwood Vale and Fairmarket to Seaguard, from which they would take ship to Barrowton with a visit in Flint's Finger as well. From there they would march to Torrens Square and then back to Winterfell. The journey would take 6 months and show him and his family and heir to much of the Riverlands, as well as the southwest of the north. For hundreds of thousands of his subjects it would be the first time they ever saw him, maybe even the only time too. He and Alis had been planning it for months now. Nonetheless, it couldn't come at a worse time. Alis' recent miscarriage had dampened everybody's spirits severely. Some also had questions about leaving Rickon alone as the Stark of Winterfell, but he had already arranged for Jon to be regent for him whilst Arya and Sansa had promised to visit him. His family would soon be scattered again. Sansa in the Dread Fort, Arya in Castle Sewin, he and his children travelling around the Riverlands with Alis and his mother and Bran in Riverrun. Still, it was for the best. His people needed to see House Stark. He would not become like the Targaryens or Baratheons, expecting people to pay taxes and die for you in wars without them knowing who you are. Your Grace. His advisor asked. Excuse me, Roderick. I was thinking about the royal progress. Please continue. He apologized for his lack in concentration. Many and more plans have been made up. Expanding the towns along the Gold Road, expanding the population of the New Gift, the development of the lands around Moat Cailin, reconstruction of the fortress, the construction of villages and small towns all along the new road projects and much more, but there is simply no more coin for it. I am afraid to tell you that by now we have exhausted much of our reserves, especially after buying in food throughout the winter. He nodded. I understand, although you have to remember that our income has never been as high, and it is growing every day with the improvement of the weather and trade following in its wake. The areas conquered from the Reach are progressing well enough and can be left for a later date. The construction of settlements along the roads will also have to wait on the roads itself. He summarized practically. Concerning the New Gift, change is rapidly being achieved. The Umbers have sent hundreds of farmers north to their new territories east of the King's Road. This will be the first of many waves they are planning to send up there, and with their gains from the war they have even started the construction of a small fortified village, around which most of the first farmsteads are being built. I heard the small Jon mention that it could possibly serve as the future seat of his younger brother Ned. If they plan to give it to one of their own, they will not neglect it. He started. The Ryswells have also sent hundreds of farmers to their lands west of the King's Road, around their own small fortified town. A wooden castle has been built on a hill there to rule the area from. Master Roose Ryswell has even managed to convince his father to allow the migration of a handful of his horse breeders. They plan to start training the future generations of Garons for the hill clans and rangers of the Night's Watch. Some mountain clans, like the Nerys, have extended their lands into the New Gift, while 3 new, small clans have been created through marriages of multiple others in the area. These people are populating the mountains of the New Gift as we speak and will in the future protect the western flank from wilderling raids along the gorge or the Bay of Ice. I think the Gift will do well without additional help from us for now. He finished with a smug smile. Even so, I would want you to look into the Moat Cailin area. We do not have the coin to rebuild the fortress, so you don't have to spend your time on that. Nevertheless, the development of the lands around it could make it more viable in the future. It could also help trade along the King's Road, if more inns and settlements establish themselves there. More specifically, I want you to investigate sending farmers from Sewin, Stark, Hornwood and Bolton lands there. A few hundred will do for now. I will, Your Grace, although I have to ask if asking the Sewins is a good idea. They have just allowed hundreds of people to leave their lands a few months ago together with people from the lands of Houses Woolfield and Slate to settle in the Hayford lands that you awarded to Lord Sewin's nephew. He countered him. You're right, Roderick. I forgot about that. Ask Clee anyway, but don't push him too hard if he isn't willing to send a lot. Maybe ask Lady Barbary to send a few dozen to make up for it instead. He replied. It will be done, Your Grace. If I may ask, how is the integration of the Northerners in the new Riverlands coming along? His Master of Infrastructure asked him. Very well, from what I gather. In Sumber and Carstark /Rossby lands, they are quickly intermingling with Old Gods-believing Riverlanders that moved there and the locals. Especially in new or rebuilt rural settlements just around the keeps. They remain a small minority for the time being, but the Old Gods-believing population is steadily growing. Most local female heirs have married Northerners and extinct houses have been replaced with them as well. A lot of Northerners and Old Gods-believing Riverlanders have received household positions in Rossby and Last Castle. Hayford remains largely Andal for now, although a few Northerns have received lands there. Once Martin Castle comes of age, that too will partly change. He explained the situation in the southeastern corner of his realm. The locals haven't complained about this. Dustin asked in a surprising tone. Some have, but especially in the former King's Landing area those have moved away to follow Sir Corlys Menning or seek their fortune in any of the other settlements consisting of large portions of refugees. A handful of those around Rossby have been encouraged to follow them. Nonetheless, many Andals have also been given new opportunities under the new management and are glad for it. Only the old pro-Targaryen knightly houses have made serious complaints and they have been discredited and reduced after the war anyway. In Stokeworth, the same is happening, but instead of replacing the old Crown Landers with Northerners they are being replaced by Riverlanders from the lands of houses Tully and Grull. Interesting. Is the situation in Hayford the same? He was asked. Partly, but the opposition there is greater. Even so, a nephew of Lord Slate has gotten lands from an extinct house and a Sewin cousin, a younger brother of House Corden and the bastard of Lord Woolfield have married heirs in the lands. Together, they are protecting the northern population and they have served as a beacon for northern migrants and veterans willing to settle down. Their small lands are quickly transforming into areas where a third of the population are Northerners, with Old Gods-believing Riverlanders also going there in smaller numbers, whilst the rest of the Hayford lands remain almost exclusively southern. Isn't that dangerous in the long term? Roderick asked him and he had to agree. But the situation only needs to hold itself together for a decade. After that, Martin will be able to take full command of his lands and represent my interests there personally. I will ensure that his household will consist of a healthy mix of both peoples and that he will encourage intermingling between them. His good relations to me and the surrounding lords will do the rest. For now, the regent knows that his own position is endangered if he lets the two groups clash, so he keeps them separated as much as possible. He explained his reasoning. Roderick looked deep in thought but nodded at that. They worked out more details together, such as the location of harbors and how to reach out to certain nobles with their plans. In the end, they looked over all the work they had done in contentment. He thanked his advisor profusely and waited until he left his solar. He put away all the documents and left himself. He walked over to the Godswood, where he knew Alis could be found. She had been there a lot lately, so it could have been a good guess, but it wasn't a guess. Grey was with her and he always knew where he could find him. He found her sitting around the shores of the pond under the weirwood tree together with Wyler and both their children, accompanied by 3 of their ladies. He recognized a knight's daughter from White Harbor, Lysa Slate and Marna Flint. The latter 2 had been recent additions to their court. Both girls were around 15 years old and served his wife, quickly becoming like younger sisters to her. He had warned her that she would have to pick ladies from the Riverlands too, and she had agreed to look for suitable women on their procession south. Grey noticed him first, and he happily sauntered over to him. Ghost simply raised his head in greeting, whilst remaining with little Lionel. His 5-year-old daughter noticed how Grey ran away from her and quickly ran after the direwolf, before seeing him. "Daddy!" She screamed loudly and ran towards him. Grey seemed to notice and the direwolf seemed to want to have some fun. He aggressively jumped him, using his weight to force him to fall to the ground. His companion had been vigilant not to hurt him, but he was still stuck under a 250-pound animal. Grey Wind seemed to laugh at him, as he fondly licked his face. Edara quickly ran from behind him and jumped his only free shoulder to hug him and give him kisses on the one cheek Grey wasn't momentarily licking. Daddy fell over. She loudly laughed. He used his one free hand to grab a hold of her and lightly tickle her. Her high squeals filled the forests and soon his little baby boy joined them too as he waggled over to them. He clumsily fell on top of him and his sister and he was almost in danger of being smothered to death by his own children. In his mind, he gave Grey the order to get off him and the direwolf immediately obeyed. In his place, both his children crawled on top of him and he playfully roughhoused with them for a bit, until Alice stopped them. "Rob Stark, how do you suppose me to ever be able to tell your two children to stop dirtying their expensive clothes when their father rolls around with them in expensive fur coats that most of the nobility can only dream of? Those furs, which your clothes are made of, were a gift from Lord Hornwood to celebrate your 5-year reign." She scolded him, but her smile betrayed how she really felt at the sight of her husband and children playing together. He looked at her and smiled his most boyish grin, as he waved his hand through his little boy's hair as he babbled. She rolled her eyes at him and gave him a stern look, meaning it was time for him to get up. He carefully pulled his two children in his arms and stood up. He placed Edda in his neck and held Ricard on his arm, as he symbolically dusted parts of the mud from his clothes. From the corner of his eyes, he saw Wyler and the other ladies laugh at him and he winked at her in greeting. Together with his children, he walked over to his wife and kissed her. She scoffed at him that they were all behaving like beasts, but she kissed him anyway. He gave her another kiss on her cheek as he laughed. "If you didn't want to have a husband and children that behaved like beasts, you shouldn't have married into a family of direwolves." He looked up and winked at his little girl at the end and she laughed and nodded at him. "Father and I are direwolves," she exclaimed. "And Rookie too. Rookie is a baby pup wolf." She giggled as she grabbed her little brother's hand below her and raised it in the air. "Icky wolf," he loudly shouted in support of his sister's words. Alice looked fondly upon the sight, as did he. He grabbed her in a small hug and whispered in her ear out of earshot of their children. "How are you?" He felt her smile against his cheek, and she gave him a kiss on his cheek. "Now that you are all here, I am doing great." Then she pushed him away. "Now, try to at least to act like the king you are. You are embarrassing me in front of my ladies." She looked around. "Where is your guard? Why are you walking around alone without Grey?" she asked sternly. "Northgard was with me." He smiled knowingly. "He is waiting at the entrance of the Godswood." She nodded in response. "Where are your guards?" "Todd was with us, but I sent him away to get some rest. Grey is all the protection we'll ever need." He looked at the direwolf and he looked smugly back at him. He scratched him behind his ears and under his maw. "Good boy," he whispered to him. "Grey is a very good boy. I want to pet him too," Edda loudly demanded. He bowed through his knees and put Ricard on the ground first, before pulling Edara from his neck. She immediately started petting the direwolf, who was over twice her size, and her brother joined in. Grey was so kind as to go and lay down, otherwise Ricard couldn't even reach him. He left his children with his companion and walked over to the other women with Alice. He greeted them all personally, before picking up little Lionel from the ground and giving her a big kiss on her cheek. She rewarded him with a big smile, and she babbled as she put her tiny hands on his face. "I spent thrice the amount of time with her than he does, but all she ever has eyes for is him." Alice scoffed jokingly. Wyler rolled her eyes. "I know how you feel. It's the wolves," he simply replied, without looking at them. "How so?" Wyler asked. "The wolves follow us. The children recognize that, and they all recognize one another as part of a whole. The lone wolf dies but the pack survives, my father always said, and he was right. They recognize us as part of the pack and know that they aren't alone. Maybe they don't know why, but they know they are safe." Wyler laughed. "Laya isn't really a wolf, you know." He looked at her and scoffed. "Semantics, John and his children will always be wolves to me. Damned be those people that declare otherwise." This earned him a good-natured laugh from Wyler. He wouldn't have it any other way. She smiled back at him. He looked at the little girl in his arms. You are a wolf pup, little girl. Different name or not, you can't change the blood. You are a wolf, wolf, wolf. He laughed, as he poked her softly on the nose every time he said wolf. She giggled back loudly, exclaiming of, "Very good." He replied, kissing her twice more on the forehead, before handing her back to her mother. He looked over all the ladies looking at him. "I am sorry to interrupt your day, ladies. Would it be all right if I sit with you?" He asked very formally, with mud still decorating his fur tunic. This resulted in a wave of laughter rolling over the forest. "Husband, you have already disrupted us more than I previously thought possible. If you wish to sit with us in your own keep, please do so, but quit the antics." Alice laughingly scolded him. "As you command, my queen," he replied with a mock bow, before sitting down. She just rolled his eyes at him, not giving him the pleasure of a response. He spent the rest of the day together with them. At some point, John and Rukan also joined them together with Ghost and Shaggy after his little brother's sword training. He allowed Northgard to go to his rooms then. 3 adult direwolves were more than enough to protect all of them. Chapter 76, Touring the Riverlands. 6f. Rob. He put a hand above his eyes to shield himself from the sun, as he heard the waves crash against the wooden pillars of the dock below him. Above him, he heard seagulls calling. He barely registered any of it. All he had eye for was the large ship slowly sailing away from him into Blackwater Bay. His wife and children were on that ship. His whole life was on that ship, he thought sadly. He missed them already, but Alice could not be convinced to stay. He understood, but he still didn't like it. He thought about the hug his little boy had given him when saying goodbye, or the sloppy kiss on his cheek that had made his daughter laugh so loudly. He thought about the chaste kiss he had shared with Alice here on the dock only moments ago, and about the passionate night that had preceded it. All their plans had had to change, and he sincerely hoped that it was for the better. Their royal progress had started off well. Alice had recovered from the mental challenges she had experienced after her miscarriage, and logistically everything had gone swimmingly. They had left Winterfell, and as a symbolic start of their journey, they had been hosted by Arya and Clee in Castle Sewin. From there, they had made their way towards Moat Cailin and marched down the causeway. By the time they reached the Riverlands, their party had consisted of 250 people. 100 soldiers from the Winterfell garrison, his family, his mother, some of his advisors and nobles with their own retinues, 7 men from the Kingsguard with their squires, a handful of servants and a lot of squires, coachmen, stable masters and the like. They first stopped at Hugo Vance's new keep. The knight had changed his name to Sir Hugo Moras to signify the fact his lands lay next to the swampy area of the Neck. His seat was the old keep of House Hague, but it was in the progress of being modified. When Robert Glover had sent Cregan Bowl to take the keep, he hadn't cared for it to remain in good condition. This had given Hugo the chance to modify it and make it his own. The roofing had been done anew in a different color. Some support buildings had been rebuilt in a more southern Riverlander style reminiscent of his ancestral home at Trenta. Most of the scorch marks had been removed and the walls and gates were being fortified. He and his new family had welcomed them all very hospitably, and Edda and Rick had loved playing with his 2-year-old son. After that, they had visited the twins. Oliver had been very welcoming. It had been quite surreal to stand in Lord Walder's former keep and feel safe and at home, but his former squire had managed it. His friend had shown him all the changes he had made in his household and the way he governed the remaining free lands. To his surprise, many of his advisors came from the Rossby lands. It seemed not all had welcomed the coming of the Northmen there, and they had found refuge with Oliver, as his mother had been a Rossby. It served the lands well to have new advisors not accustomed to Lord Walder's old ways. They had continued their journey south along the King's Road and had visited houses Roger and Terrick. Whilst the former had been very happy to host them, the latter had been less so. Lord Terrick had been respectful, but he could feel some animosity over his policies in the former Crown lands. One of the Lord's brothers had even made a snooky comment after one too many drinks. Something about not expecting to be allowed to plant those heathen trees on our family's lands. Lord Terrick had immediately apologized and sent his brother away, but it was clear many in his court felt the same way. After visiting House Root at Harroway, they had been hosted by the Castellan of House D'Ari for a night. Then they had crossed the Bay of Crabs on small ships for a 2 days visit to Solpants. The old Sir Quincy had been honoured by their visit, and he had reacquainted himself with his sons and godsons who had fought with him during the war. They had sailed on to Maidenpool and had been hosted by the regent of House Mouton. Together with Roderick Dustin, the three of them had had a very serious conversation about what he had spent their coin on and what more was needed for Maidenpool to flourish again. In the end, both had decided that the regent had done his job well enough. Most of the actual town and port had been rebuilt and repopulated, mostly with survivors from King's Landing who had been fed through food transports hailing from the Reach and Bravos. The keep and walls around the town still showed obvious scars from the war, but the regent had told him that he had prioritized the people and the economic life over the keep and the defenses, for which he had been glad. A family of shipbuilders from King's Landing had relocated to Maidenpool, and through their efforts a small trading fleet of 10 cogs had been built over the years. This had attracted other private investors, and ships from foreign ports and trade seemed to be growing every day. From Maidenpool they had departed on a 2-week journey through Cracklaw Point. All the petty houses there had hosted them as if it had been the occasion of the century. They all told him how their land gains and tax exemptions had helped their families and how they are once again investing into the peninsula after centuries of decline. He had laughed and drank with them, and Edda had played with their daughters. Their next visit had been to Rook's Rest, where they had met with its new lord. After House Staunton's betrayal, the lands had been split. House Mouton had gotten small parts of its lands, a third had gone to the houses of Cracklaw Point, and the remainder, including the keep, had gone to the second son of Lord Root. The Riverlander knight now styled himself Lord Cleo's Rook. He had wed Eleanor Mouton, which had ensured peace and stability in the region. It was in Rook's Rest that Ailys found out that she was pregnant again. Both of them had been incredibly happy, but to his surprise she had also been very scared. She had been scared to have another miscarriage and had demanded to go back to Winterfell immediately. He had been stupefied by her request. They had months of traveling through the Riverlands ahead of themselves, and dozens of noble families were counting on their presence during that time. The more they argued about it, the more it became clear that Ailys wouldn't budge on the topic. She wanted their child to be of the north and to be born in Winterfell, and she didn't want to risk losing it by traveling. In the end, they had compromised. Instead of taking the first ship in Duskendale, she would come along to Riverport, formerly known as King's Landing. She agreed to visit the northern enclaves that had settled in the Blackwater region, among them her cousins Alaric, Bernard and Harmond. They journeyed on land to Duskendale and were hosted by House Rytker for 3 days. Lord Jasper Rytker had recently wed Umber, and relations between Duskendale and Riverport seemed better than he had expected. A few Northmen could unexpectedly be found in its court. 3 friends of the lady's father had apparently relocated to the city with their families after the wedding. One had joined the guard, another the city watch, and the last one was trying to make a living through trade. Other family friends seemed to be visiting them as well during their stay. Afterwards they visited Stokeworth, where they were hosted by Sir Desmond Grill, who had become the new head of House Stokeworth through his marriage with Lollies. The old master-at-arms was gracious, but he too implied concerns about the fact that around a dozen weirwoods had been planted on the combined lands of Houses Rosby, Sumber and Hayford. He had managed to put Sir Desmond's concerns to rest for now. It was not as if he hadn't expected any backlash on the move. Their next stop had been Rosby, where Ailys and To had gladly reunited with their kin. Alaric seemed happy in his new home, and Lady Roslyn shared the same sentiment. The lady had kept much of the old Rosby customs that she had been told about by her late mother alive, which had ended the couple to the peasantry and some of the lower nobility. Alaric's court was filled with Northmen mixed in with Crownlanders. His 2 cousins Bernard and Harmond had been given modest lands. One by marrying the orphaned heir of a knightly house, and the other had received the lands of an exiled family. Most of his 24 friends had either received lands or important positions in his household. Other countrymen like Sir Roderick Locke had also received lands of their own, and they were intermingling quickly with the local nobles, as most had taken southern women native to the area as their wives. Northern veterans and settlers from all over his kingdom had flocked to the lands and spread out across it. Already, a third of the Rosby Guard consisted of northern veterans, and much of the smaller holdfasts nearby told a similar story. Northern and mixed villages had sprung up at every place where new land could be cleared for farming or local fishing could be expanded upon, but most of the local peasants seemed to accept it. The local small folk seemed happy with their new rulers ever since Alaric had lowered their taxes for 5 years to replenish from the war. After Rosby, they visited Hayford. The young lady Amesandi seemed a happy and spirited child, and the Castellan was very welcoming. He expressed his concerns about the number of northern migrants and the resentment it was causing with a faction of the established nobility. Yet, he seemed to have a good working relationship with John Slate, Donald Sewin, Torrin Corden and Lotus Snow, all of whom had chosen new family names for themselves. He met up with the young nobles, who told them a similar story. After they planted weirwood saplings in their new lands, the conflict seemed to have escalated much as it initially had in the Rosby lands. However, the northern faction in Hayford was much weaker and they didn't have as much support from the peasantry as they had over there. He ordered the young nobles to stay vigilant and avoid conflict at all costs. Once Martin came of age, more permanent solutions could be made from a position of strength. He had also promised to talk to the Crownlander nobles and did so. Some, he managed to pacify, while others had no mind to hear reason. He passed the names on to the Castellan to keep an eye on them. Lastly, they arrived in Riverport. The sight they saw there was surreal. He had been in King's Landing some 5 years ago, but everything had changed. Egon's Hill remained a destitute ruin, but Rhaenyra's Hill had completely vacated, the dragon pit removed to the last stone. Half the city was gone too. A large part of the northern wall was gone, and behind the wall and around Rhaenyra's Hill nothing but wild fields remained. All signs of buildings had been removed and nature was quickly winning back the land. The only thing reminiscent of the vibrant urban life that had existed there were the sporadic remains of cobblestones and rotten pieces of wood that were scattered around. Half of what had encompassed the former city were now deserted fields, with the much smaller population living comfortably in the southeastern third of the former city. The areas all around the former walls, like the tourney grounds, were dotted with small hamlets and farmsteads consisting mostly of northern settlers and old gods-believing Riverlanders. This had created an interesting dynamic. The vast majority of the 35,000 inhabitants of the city were Crownlanders, with only 1,000 or so being northerners and a similar number hailing from the Riverlands. Around the large town a ring of rural settlements had been created, predominantly made up out of old gods believers. Around that ring the existing Andal rural population still resided. More northerners still moved to the area sporadically, especially those from White Harbour that saw opportunities for trade and fishing there. This created an interesting multicultural situation, but Roderick Sumber seemed well loved by all and capable enough to manage it. He and his family had been hailed as heroes by the population, and Roderick had explained that he had made sure that they always knew that the food he had delivered was not only provided by him, but also by House Stark. As such, he had won over the town's remaining population in just a few years. Not only that, much of the rural Andal population as well. His guard and the town watch consisted of the remaining 300 levies that had survived the war under Roderick's command, augmented by the same number of northern veterans. All in all, the situation couldn't be better after the changes that the area had seen in recent years. They had been feasted in Roderick's wooden keep for 5 days, before he now found himself on the docks with only Grey Wind, his uncle Brynden and his mother around him. She put a hand on his shoulder in support as he sighed and turned around whilst thinking of Alis. Grey let out a soft whine as he kept looking at the ship. "I know, boy, I know. We will see them again in a few months." He spoke softly to his direwolf, as he mentally called him to his side. Silently, they rode back with their now much smaller guard. 4 members of his Kingsguard, half the guard and most of the servants had left with Alis. The squadron of ships from Riverport and Duskendale would sail to Runestone, where she would visit the Royces on a diplomatic visit, before being escorted by Marndale ships ordered to take her home. They rode through the River Gate, one of the few that would remain in function in Riverport, although it had been renamed the Harbour Gate. He rode up Visnia's Hill, aptly renamed to Giant's Hill. He rode through the gates of the keep and looked around at the masons and labourers working on the stone curtain wall that was arising all around the top of the hill. Roderick prioritized the defensiveness of the fortress over the pleasures of a stone keep, which only showed he had chosen the right man to protect the Blackwater border. In the courtyard all his remaining servants stood assembled, ready for departure. Roderick walked up to him. Your Grace, I have assembled this guard of 35 men to escort you along your travels across the Riverlands. I cannot, in good conscience, let you leave with the mere 50 men you have now, whether they are accompanied by 3 excellent Kingsguard or not. He respectfully voiced, at the end nodding lowly in respect to Sir Bryndon. He looked over the men that had assembled. They are made of good northern stock, all veterans of your wars in the south. They have followed you through the Riverlands before and they will gladly do so again. Their commander is Ronald Mooserider, he hails from Clan Knot of the Northern Mountains and is loyal to the bone. A large man in his early 30s stepped forward. He had a battle scar on his forehead that cut through his right eyebrow, along with the signs of old cuts on his exposed arms. He wore a chest plate of good steel, functional but without any ornaments. At his hip hung a sword and a one-handed battle axe, as well as a small dagger. It would be my honor to be able to serve you once more, Your Grace. He loudly proclaimed as he hit his fist on his chest plate on the place where his heart was located. This symbol was accompanied with a bow from his head. The same goes for my men, don't you think so, lads? He shouted, while raising his head. All shouted aye, as the men repeated the formal gestures their commander had made. Those scars you carry, Ronald, any of those happened to you in my service? He asked the large warrior. Aye, Your Grace. He replied. Most of them, in fact. Then the man grinned. This one I'm especially fond of. He voiced, as he touched the scar on his forehead. How so? He asked. Some Okert knight gave it to me, a cousin of the main line. He gave it to me so I would never forget him. In return, I made sure that my axe was the last thing he would ever remember. He laughed, as he patted the axe at his side proudly. Some of his southern advisers looked upon the spectacle in shock, but he simply smiled at the man as he looked him in his eyes. He turned back to Lord Roderick and grinned. Aye, these lot will do. Lord Roderick let out a giant roar of laughter, soon to be followed by the men in front of them. He clasped arms with the giant lord. It was an honor hosting you and your family, Your Grace. You can rest assured that we will hold the border of your kingdom here until death takes us. By then our sons will pick up our swords to do the same for the beloved young prince we had the pleasure of meeting. He had to smile at the memory of Ricard and Edara playing with Lord Roderick's young twin sons. I have no doubt about that, Lord Roderick. He replied. There will be no border safer in my realm than the one protected by you and your men, or your offspring. He meant those words. The works Lord Roderick had done were impressive. It would be at least another 10 years before the Stormlands could even think of successfully invading them. By then they would be met with a strong keep looking down upon them from Giants Hill over strong city walls armed with a cohesive force of northerners and southerners alike. He pitied any army that would try to attack it. They left along the Gold Road, accompanied on their march by the shining southern sun. They passed by new farms and villages of northerners and riverlanders that had happily settled along the Blackwater with their new families. All came out to greet him and many shouted old war songs and battle chants at him as he passed, all of them answered by him and his men. These were the veterans of his campaigns and without them his family and these lands would not be free. Never would he take these men for granted. 4 weeks later. He found himself at Pink Maiden, but he had expected a much warmer welcome. Of course, most of the houses on his way here had been disappointed that his family wasn't with him, but they had nonetheless been honored and happy to be able to host their king and show him their lands. He had stopped by his uncle's old war companion first, Sir Harry Rivers. He now styled himself Harry Mossbridge, after the bridge that spanned the Blackwater on the border of his lands. A small, but sturdy, stone keep was coming along on a hill there to guard over the crossing. Below it a town of some 8,000 that escaped King's Landing had arisen and it seemed to be faring well on trade with Riverport, the Riverlands and the Reach. Afterwards he had visited houses Menning and Parrell in the former Reach lands and then Stony September. These lands were still replenishing from the war, but all seemed to go well enough. On the way he stopped at various small holdfasts and had talks with smaller families eager to have the king's ear. Some had voiced concerns about the situation with the northerners at the mouth of the Blackwater, but all in all he had been welcomed warmly wherever he went. However, House Piper had been different. From the moment that he had arrived, the family and most of the people had been cold towards him. Lord Clement Piper had grown bitter in the years that he hadn't seen him. During the same time, his remaining son Lewis had become spiteful. He seemed to hold the death of his older brother Mark against him, as he had been slain during the war. Much of the lower nobility reacted the same, as House Piper's hold on them was very strong. No one wanted to tell him what was going on. Finally, he found himself in a dark backroom with the forgotten nephew of one of the Piper's vassals. He had presented himself as Sir Stanton Granler. What happened here during all these years? Sir Mark was a good friend of the Tullys and we had a good understanding. Lord Clement was nothing except loyal. How come all of this has suddenly changed? He asked the young knight. The Riverlander looked around him as if to check nobody could hear him, but only the two of them and his uncle were present. He bent a little forward and softly responded. It seems that Lord Clement and most his vassals had expected to be rewarded much more than they were after their losses. The cream of our young nobility died that day at Atlanta besides our lord's heir. Two of my uncles and one of my cousins did as well, but I never liked them anyway. To hear Lord Clement say it, it was as if you betrayed them. He looked questioningly at the young knight. What does he say exactly? Our sons bled and died all over the Riverlands for that boy. At the same time our keeps were ransacked, and our lands burned by the Lannisters, and what did we get in return? A few miles of scorched borderland and a small sack of gold. If we licked his boots enough, we could also receive some half-starved refugees from King's Landing with dubious loyalties. On top of that, he has the audacity to declare how he is granting us tax exemptions to rebuild our lands. As if there is anything left to tax that the Lannisters haven't already destroyed or taken with them. Sir Stanton voiced in a bad impression of the short fat lord of Pink Maiden. He looked over to his uncle in concern, but all he got was the same reaction back. During their visit, Lord Clement had openly criticized the absence of Alice and his children and how he was handling the Blackwater Bay area, but this went a lot further. He talked some more with the Riverlander knight and handed him a sack of gold coins afterwards for his service. Then he turned to his commander of the Kingsguard. What should we do about this? He asked him. This is serious, although I have heard nothing of plotting or rebellious intentions. To be fair, I don't think that Lord Clement even has the manpower or coin to start anything meaningful either. All I hear are the spiteful comments of a bitter old man. He sighed. If you think about it politically, he only has one son to build alliances with, and Sir Lewis has married Realta Vance already. A good marriage that strengthens his position in the region, but House Vance of Wayfarer's Rest has come out of the war just as battered as they have. He lost most of his adult male kin during the war, and except for the one cousin that married Lady Lefford, none of his kin have made alliances that do anything except strengthen their hold over their local vassals for now. He has two nieces that will be able to be married off soon, but none of the heirs of major houses are available for marriage. Nor would they go for those two, as House Piper could hardly afford the kinds of dowries these houses would desire. Sir Bryndon analyzed the situation. He thought over all that was said and agreed with his interpretation of the situation. Even so, there is something we need to be able to do. I would talk about it with Ed Muir. He is their direct liege lord. The Pipers have been loyal to the Tullys for years, and my nephew honestly cared for Sir Mark. Maybe he can mend the relationship for us through fostering or something. House Piper, once rebuilt, remains a very strong house protecting our western border. After marrying into House Lefford, this has become even more important. He agreed with that and would talk about it with Ed Muir in Riverrun in a few weeks. I think it is very important we keep the progress going now. Nowhere else have we received this kind of criticism. If it remains isolated to the Pipers, or even them and a few of their neighbors, it isn't the end of the world, however it cannot spread across the rest of the Riverlands. His uncle voiced, and he had to agree again. Very well, uncle. We'll do it your way. However, I'll be glad when we depart from this place on the morrow. He sighed. Sir Bryndon looked him in the eyes. As do I, nephew, as do I. 3 weeks later. After zigzagging through the western Riverlands, they had finally reached Riverrun. On their way here, they had stopped at Wayfarer's Rest, Acorn Hall, Lichester, Stonehenge and Atlanta, and many of the smaller holdfasts belonging sworn to these places. At the site of the battle, they had had a memorial for the battle that had been fought there over 5 years ago. He couldn't believe how long it has been since he had last seen Lord Ricard, but he pulled himself up at the thought of how happy he would be with all his grandchildren from him and Alice or from Harry. The Vances of Wayfarer's Rest and the Smallwoods had had similar misgivings as the Pipers, albeit much less extreme. Old Lord Limond Leicester had finally found peace and his heir had been hospitable enough. The Brackens and Vances of Atranta had welcomed him heartily, although they also broached the subject of the Weirwoods in the south multiple times. It had been a very informative experience to meet his vassals' families and to visit all their keeps, but he was very glad that he would be back at Riverrun. Here he would be safe amongst family. His mother, who rode next to him, had been acting giddy ever since they had passed a mill she remembered from her childhood. The closer they got to Riverrun the more she seemed to giggle happily. He had never seen her like that before, but it made him think of a much younger Sansa when she was told poems about knights, princesses and courtly love. He looked questioningly towards his uncle, but he seemed very happy to see her like that. Maybe this was how his mother had been when she was a child in Riverrun, happy and quick to laugh. She smiled widely when the walls of her childhood home came into view in the distance. He shook his head softly at the spectacle his mother was making but kept quiet. As they neared the Red Fork from the south, he could see the gates open in the distance and a small party rode out to meet them. They circled around the river over the bridge towards them. A dozen riders neared them, but there was something else coming, another shape. The huge beast would have scared many a man, but now it was his time to smile as he recognized Summer running towards him. Suddenly, the direwolf ran away from the front of the group coming towards them, followed by a lonely rider racing at top speed. He shared a look with Grey Wind and without warning he loudly called Heoa. He pushed his spurs into the flanks of his horse and he and Grey Wind sped off together. He heard his guards shout in surprise and annoyance, but over them all he could hear his uncle curse. "Damned Starks! Wild beast half the time! Why couldn't you marry a Reachman and allow me to enjoy my old day in peace?" His last words were probably directed at his mother, but by now he was already out of earshot, as he raced towards the two figures in the distance. When they got closer, the other rider slowed down, but he himself didn't. He raced towards him and got on his stirrups, then he forced his horse to a halt and jumped off as the other rider dismounted as well. He ran forward and crashed into his brother as both held each other in a bear hug. The two direwolves did the same, yapping and howling in joy at seeing each other again. He held his brother for a little while, before he pushed him away at arm's length to look at him. "You have grown," he told him. His brother looked good. He was 15 years old now and he had grown multiple inches since he had last seen him. His chest had filled out a little bit and his arms weren't so thin anymore. He was dressed in his training armor and seemed to have jumped up on his horse quickly to see him. His assumption was soon confirmed. "I was training in the yard. I rode out as soon as I could, but Uncle Edmure only let me go with him once he arrived with a few guards. As if they are any use against Summer or Grey Wind." His little brother scoffed. Both looked at their massive direwolves who were roughhousing in the grass beside them. Both were bigger than a horse and their teeth could bite a man's leg right off. Nevertheless, all they looked like now were two overgrown and very happy puppies. He laughed at his brother's joke and waved his hand through his long curls lovingly. "You need to cut your hair. It's much too long for this southern spring weather. You will sweat yourself to death." He spoke out, slight mocking in his voice. Then he noticed something else and lifted his brother's chin up forcefully. "And you need a shave, ha ha. What are you trying to achieve with that stubble, boy?" He laughed loudly, as other riders reached them. Bran tried to look angry at him for the joke, as his brother hit him upon the arm in retaliation. He just let it slide and grinned at him. He looked up and saw that 3 boys around Bran's age in training gear had arrived. He looked them over and the colors they wore. "Lord Mouton, Lord D'Ari and Master Blackwood, I suppose?" he asked, ignoring the riders that had come up behind him. He already knew it would be his Kingsguard and how angry they would be. All 3 dismounted their horses and got on one knee. "Yes, Your Grace," they all replied. He nodded in response to their gesture and told them to get up. He clasped their arms right after. "Any friends of my brother are friends of mine," he told them, and they looked back in confusion, but that quickly made way for pride in their young eyes. Behind him, his mother had arrived. She dismounted as elegantly as ever, but then she threw herself in Bran's arms. He noticed that Bran had surpassed her in height now, and she voiced the same, as Edmure arrived in front of him. His uncle bowed ceremoniously, before grabbing him into a hug. "Nephew," he called out, and he greeted him back in the same familiar manner. Afterwards he greeted Uncle Bryden, followed by his mother. "Cat, it's so good to see you. Riverrun has missed your presence every day since you left. Winterfell is my home now, brother, but not a day has passed since I arrived there where I haven't thought of Riverrun's flowing rivers and glowing hills." She grinned back. "What are we waiting for then? Let me have the honor to escort you inside once more. The household has been dying to meet you." Edmure responded proudly, and they both mounted their horses once more. Behind them he saw Bran greet Uncle Brynden. He had always been one of his brother's heroes, and it seemed they still got along as well as they did when he had left Winterfell. He presented the 3 young nobles of the Riverlands to his advisors, and afterwards he jumped back in the saddle again. He saw the young Lord Dare marvel at the 2 direwolves rolling around in the grass with both curiosity and fear in his eyes. The boy noticed him looking and gulped. "I have spent hundreds of hours with Summer, but I have never seen him like that. On one side he seems aggressive and dangerous, and on the other side he has never looked happier." He nodded in agreement at the analysis. That summarizes it, I guess. They are playing and are happy, but they roughhouse like brothers do. They challenge and bait each other, and that can be somewhat aggressive. However, never let this fool you. They are pulling their punches. In battle, they are something else entirely." Lyman Dare looked at him in shock. "They are worse than this." He laughed loudly. "This is them playing, look." He whistled loudly, and suddenly Grey Wind growled and pinned Summer to the ground. He yapped once at him before letting him go and happily waggling towards him. His head reached up to his own chest from atop his horse, and he lazily scratched his companion behind his ears, as the direwolf let his tongue out. "Good boy," he whispered to him. The young Lord Dare looked absolutely flabbergasted, and his friend Lord Mouton did too. That was a small demonstration. He is the older brother after all. He winked at the pubescent boys, and Grey lazily followed his gaze. He just put Summer on his back like it was nothing." Lord Lyman muttered. "It was not nothing, as Summer is very powerful. However, Grey is the elder and is much more experienced. Grey has fought dozens of battles and has killed and maimed hundreds of men. Summer's experience consists of fighting a few lost Ironborn in the Godswood of Winterfell. There is a difference. Summer is very, very dangerous, but Grey Wind is lethal in everything he does when he wants to be," he explained. Both Riverlander lords gulped audibly, as they looked at the direwolf that was purring as he scratched behind his ears. They were visibly scared of his companion, which was not a bad thing for 2 powerful lords in the eastern Riverlands. He ruled by respect and companionship, but they needed to understand that he wasn't to be trifled with too. He decided that Grey's demonstration had been more than enough of that. "Don't worry. Grey is just like Summer. Summer would never hurt one of his master's friends, nor would Grey Wind. As I said before, I consider my brother's friends to be mine own." He winked. This calmed them down considerably, although they kept throwing scared glances to his direwolf all the way to Riverrun. On their way there, his Kingsguard took their places close to him. His great-uncle rode on his right, as his commander. Sir Benedict Blackwood rode up to him from behind Lord Edmure and bowed, after which he greeted his sworn brothers. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Sir Benedict took his place back next to Bran as his personal shield. He was greeted fondly by the small folk and the household, many remarking how much he still looked like his late grandfather even with his strong northern beard. Uncle Edmure and Bran spent the rest of the day showing his mother around, and he gave his other uncle leave to go along with them. Harmon Turrell, Sir Duncan Brune and Sir Benedict Blackwood were more than enough to protect him. He got settled into the keep and made sure his men were well. He used the fact that Bran was busy to ask for a formal audience with his friends and talked with the 3 of them about their vision for the Riverlands. He wanted them to feel included in his reign from the moment that they came to power themselves, which could be any time now. Mouton was already of age but remained in Riverrun for now to gain his spurs. Dare would be of age in a few months. He talked with both about their families' histories as Targaryen loyalists. He ensured them that, for him, that chapter was closed. Neither of them had been born back then, and their fathers had redeemed themselves during the last wars before they had died. Both families had regained some of the lands they had lost during the war too, and he asked them how they felt about that. Lord Miles Mouton seemed happy with the current situation and considered the lands, in combination with the coin and refugees to rebuild and repopulate Maidenpool, enough. He and his family wouldn't seek to regain other lost lands in the future. Lord Lemandare was less sure. He thanked him profusely for the lands they had regained from House Root because of him, but remarked that they had lost a lot of other lands too. In the end, he promised both boys and their future families honourable positions in his court, and Dare agreed to let it rest. Alan Blackwood was different. He was a fifth son and had no lands or titles to look out for when he came of age in a few months. He was waiting for his spurs and would then seek employment with one of his lordly brothers. The lad positively surprised him during their talks, and his loyalty to Bran was commendable. In the end, he promised him a position in the north, if he would have it when he came of age. Either in Winterfell or with Bran in Moat Cailin in the future. He had seldom seen a 15-year-old boy that happy, and both his friends also congratulated him. He walked out of that meeting with a good feeling. He placated two important lords of the Riverlands and ensured the loyal support of a promising young man for his reign in the future. He spent the evening at a big feast that Edmure threw for the return home of his family. His mother was immediately fond of Edmure's children, which wasn't surprising considering their looks and names. Both had the traditional red hair and blue eyes of the Tullys, much like himself. However, it was their names that would forever endure them to his mother, he knew. Young Hoster Tully was 2 years old. His sister, Lady Minissa Tully, was only 2 months old and the pride and joy of her lady mother. Jane Tully, née Bracken, doted on her little daughter, and his mother soon joined her in those endeavours. He loved being with his mother's family, and it was the first night since Alis had left that he felt he could let his guard down. As a result, he drank a little too much, but nothing major happened. He and Grey even played with little Hoster for a time. Grey seemed intrigued by the little boy with similar features to him and was very calm around the boy, but his message was clear. The small two-legger is cute, but not part of the pack. The next morning, he woke up late. He spent the rest of the morning reading letters from the north. One warmed his heart. Alis and their children had reached Winterfell safely, and they and the baby growing inside her were healthy. She told him much the same as Jon had about Rickon. He was still wild, but he seemed to at least take the responsibility of being the Stark of Winterfell somewhat seriously. The Ryswells had come to him about the fostering. His father had agreed with him. He had explained the problems with it, as he would be away from home a lot and needed Rickon to take ceremonial command of Winterfell when that happened, as Bran was in Riverrun and Rickard still too small to do so. They understood and renegotiated the deal now that all the bad blood between their families had long disappeared. A Ryswell cousin would be given a position in the Winterfell household. The Ryswells were given minor trade concessions along the western coast, and the Ryswell heir would be officially introduced to the Ironborn nobles with the hopes of creating relations that would benefit both peoples. After the midday meal, which he spent alone with Bran and his mother, he had a meeting with Uncle Edmure. As always, his other uncle was also present. He asked him how the Riverlands were faring, and they went over a detailed description of every major house, as well as all the major projects after the war. They soon came to the heart of the matter. A few of my vassals have voiced their concerns about the appointment of the northern lords and the planting of the weirwood trees. The Lord of the Riverrun voiced. Let me guess, houses Piper, both Vances, Bracken and Stokeworth. He sighed. Yes, those have done so. Houses Terrick and Perrin did too. All of those simply because of Blackwater Bay? He asked. No, also because of the Goodbrook lands given to Lucas Blackwood. A few hundred northerners and thousands of old gods-believing Riverlanders have settled themselves on the former Goodbrook lands. With the help of houses Sumber and the others, he has also planted 3 more weirwood trees in the heart of the Riverlands. It is scaring some of the lords, and if I'm honest, I must admit that I'm not entirely comfortable with it either. His uncle responded. He waited before answering. He needed to be careful now. As long as he had his uncles on his side, this would not be a problem, but alienating House Tully over this would be a grave mistake. Uncle, these weirwoods are simply places of worship. It is the same as building a September or hiring a wandering septon to travel through the lands. This is done constantly in the Riverlands. For those people this is the same thing, nothing more. Besides, weirwood trees have existed in the Riverlands for thousands of years without threatening your way of life. You have one with a painted face in your own castle. Did that turn you to the old gods? The head of House Tully looked at him in thought. No, it didn't. He finally relented. Neither will those handful of new ones convert your lord's people. They will simply provide a place of worship for those old gods-believing people already here. Rob replied. They locked eyes for a while, as he saw that his mother's brother was deep in thought. In the end he let out a sigh. As long as they remain within the borders of those four lordships and the Blackwood lands, I will let it be. However, others outside it will not be permitted to do so to prevent unrest in the Riverlands. That will include the remaining old gods minorities scattered around. I will not budge on that. Uncle Edmure stated firmly. He agreed on that. It was a small price to pay. Those old gods believers that wouldn't accept this could move to Blackwater Bay, the Blackwood or the Goodwood lands and be free in their worship. I do think something needs to be done to placate some of those houses. He continued the conversation. How so? His uncle stated. We were at Pink Maiden and the mood was almost hostile. I think it would be good for the realm if you would work on your relations with the houses of the Western Riverlands. He responded. Lord Edmure looked at the Blackfish, who nodded in agreement. What do you propose? Invite them to your court a few times. Talk with them and reassure them in their insecurities. Maybe you could foster a future Piper child here at Riverrun. Marriages with future children could also be interesting, although I don't think a Piper would suit your heir seeing how weakened they got out of the war. His uncle looked at him and nodded. The Pipers are a well-respected family. They would be a good option for a younger child of mine to foster with or marry. I will make work of it in the future. Thank you, uncle. He smiled, which got him a nod in return. How is the Harrenhal area doing? He asked him after some more conversation. Well enough, I think. I have visited it twice over the past few years and the Castellan seems capable. With the help of some of the refugees from the Blackwater Bay area, parts of the area have been resettled. Infrastructure has been repaired and settlements restored. The population is still down from what it has been, but the people are starting to thrive again slowly. In time, the population should bounce back to what it once was. Lord Edmure replied. He was pleased by the answer, but one obvious question remained unanswered. What about the castle itself? This waved Edmure's proud smile from his face. Rob, it's massive. I don't know how to pay for it all. I am trying to keep the areas that Lady Sheila had kept in use from falling into decay, but even that proves difficult. The other areas have been abandoned for decades and are useless without heavy investments. Coin that I don't want to waste. As I feared. He replied, whilst stroking his beard. Have you thought about demolishing or changing parts of the keep to make it work? His uncle took a deep breath. Yes, I have, but it is ambitious. The Blackfish looked at his nephew and simply raised an eyebrow. I was thinking of demolishing the 3 humongous towers that aren't in use as well as the second stable, the Hunter's Hall and other buildings in the western corner of the castle site. Harrenhal is twice the size of Winterfell. I was thinking of using the stones of the towers to build a wall, smaller than the curtain wall, around the area where the demolished buildings would have stood. In the area I think you could host a town of up to 3,000 people. Those could serve as a recruiting ground for the large garrison that will be needed and serve as an additional source of income to sustain the large household, whilst significantly lowering expenses for upkeep by demolishing those parts. He looked surprised at his uncle. You want to include a town inside of the castle grounds? Yes, I do. The curtain walls are incredibly strong. It would be a shame to have to pull them down, never would anyone rebuild such a feat of wonder. However, the area is far too large to be able to pay for its upkeep, even with its fertile lands. I would effectively demolish almost half the buildings in the keep. After that, the effective area of the castle would still be as large as Winterfell with the biggest godswood south of the neck as well. A well-established town with mostly stone buildings, a well-thought-out street pattern and a busy marketplace could fit into it without a problem. If I build a wall to bar it off from the rest of the castle with the stones we will retrieve from those towers, it could function as a separate entity on the grounds. It might become the best protected town in West Eos. That could be true. Could you show me the plans on a map? He asked. Edmure stood up and rummaged through the papers on his desk. He got back with a map of Harrenhal and multiple maps showing sketches and a possible future layout. The Tower of Ghosts, the Wailing Tower and the Tower of Dread would be destroyed. The Kingspire and Widow's Towers would be repaired as good as possible with the effects of the Dragonfire still visible. To make up for the storage space lost from the Wailing Tower, other smaller storage buildings would be constructed in the town and the cleared areas. He looked over the plans that were clearly more than simple ideas. They had been worked out to a degree that spoke of the many hours of thinking that had gone into it. This is an ambitious project, he finally remarked. It is. His uncle agreed. I think it could work, but with one big change you might not like to hear. He replied. Edmure simply raised his eyebrow in question. If you build the wall between the town and castle grounds smaller than the curtain walls, much of the defensiveness of the castle would be lost. If you infiltrate the town or get it to rebel, the soldiers could shoot from the curtain wall down on the other wall in places and force your troops off it. Both his uncles looked over the plans. I agree. Uncle Brynden remarked. You would also have to rebuild the towers on the edges of the wall, to separate that part of curtain wall from the other parts of it for if the town were to fall or rebel. The Lord of Riverrun sighed. I think you are right. However, this will be a much bigger cost than initially thought. I will investigate the possibilities. Maybe I could expand the town a little more into the castle grounds or small parts of the Godswood to pay back the extra costs in time. He agreed to that. His uncle asked him about how the north was faring, and he spoke in detail on all the changes that were going on there. After a while, they simply leaned back in their chairs with glasses of Arbor Gold and enjoyed each other's company as they talked about their families. I have an offer for you, uncle. He asked after a while, whilst taking another sip of the excellent wine. He smiled thinking it had been part of the loot of the past wars. Maybe the fighting had been good for them after all. What is it, Rob? I would extend an offer to you to foster Hoster in Winterfell when he turns 8 years old. He voiced. Lord Edmure looked surprised. You would foster my heir in Winterfell, why? Why? In time, he will be the second most powerful man in the kingdom, after my own heir. The both of them are family, but if they are raised hundreds of miles apart from each other they will never know it. Fostering them together could forge a partnership that could lead the kingdom to prosperity for another 50 years. Besides, I would foster other nobles with them as well. He could create bonds with the northern nobility he would never have a chance to if he were to remain south of the neck. Who would you be thinking of fostering with him? Edmure asked. The Karstark heir is already certain. However, others will follow too. The Umber heir, the Mandaeli heir and Sansa and Arya's future sons are highly likely. Maybe some others like the Ryswells or Dustins would join too. He responded. The head of House Tully stroked his cleanly trimmed beard. It has its merits, but it could alienate him from the Riverlands too. I would see to it that that wouldn't happen. Uncle Brynden and my mother would be there constantly to tell him about his Tully heritage. Lord Mallister and other possible Riverlanders on the council could also educate him in that manner. Besides, he would only go there after the age of 8. Before that, his upbringing would be solely from the Riverlands. After that, he could serve as the bridge between both kingdoms. Firmly from the Riverlands, but well liked by the Northerners and knowledgeable in their ways. You would be able to take him under your wing with your duties? His uncle asked the Blackfish. If Rob allows it, then yes. I would tell him everything about our ancestors, especially his grandfather and great-grandfather. I could order my brothers to teach him the ways of the sword and battle tactics even when I am unavailable. He would receive the same education the Crown Prince will receive. His great-uncle replied, and all he said was true. He had agreed to it beforehand. An interesting proposal, but it will depend on a few things. If Jane and I are blessed with other sons, the proposal is an enticing one. However, if he is the sole boy we get, problems might arise if he is sent to the north. The Lord of Riverrun mused aloud. The head of House Tully turned towards him. Would you allow me to accept it on the condition that we get other sons as well? Maybe Leighton the starting age to 9 or 10 years old as well. He accepted, of course. These were small concessions on his part, and he understood why they were asked. They hammered out a few small details until both were satisfied. After toasting to the continued good relations between houses Stark and Tully, they got up together and left the Solar. They spent the rest of the day playing with their family, from little Minissa Tully over Bran and him to Sir Brynden Tully. All had a lovely day in the Godswood of Riverrun, and he sent a small prayer to his late grandfather Hoster in the hope that he would see his family so united in the end. From the moments that he had spent with him and the hundreds of stories that he had heard from Uncle Brynden, he knew that the man would be overjoyed with this scene. Chapter 77, Meeting the New Litter. 11f. Keep in mind that there is a 5-plus-year-long time jump between this and last chapter. The family has grown significantly during that time. I have added a link to a family tree I made and will update down below, but try to read the chapter first as I introduce every character. Otherwise, you will get massive spoilers. John. Alis had gone into labor hours ago with Maester Lewin and the midwives. Wyler, Bethany and Lady Caitlin had followed them soon after to help her during her time of need. Rob had been a nervous wreck for at least the last hour. I need to go in there, John, he voiced as he paced around the room. He sighed in response. When his brother was like this, there was nothing to be done with him. As the women were busy with the birth, the men of the family had gathered together as well. He looked at Bran and Rickon for help, but they wisely kept their distance as they focused on the children. The women had wanted the maids to take care of their growing family, but he and Brandon had refused. The children needed their family and the direwolves in important moments, not maids. They took care of their children themselves. They had taken them all into the Godswood together and were only surrounded by the peaceful sounds of nature and the silent presence of the Kingsguard. He sat on a tree trunk at the edge of the pond with his 1-year-old son Edric, whom everybody lovingly called Ned, sat upon his leg. He absently rocked his boy around whilst talking to his own brothers. The boy didn't seem to notice that they were distracted, as he let out occasional sounds of joy that interrupted their conversations. Bran was doing the same to his boy Brynden Stark. Bryn was only 6 months old and was much better behaved than any of the other children had been at his age. Nevertheless, he seemed a fast learner. He had already learned how to crawl and, although he was quiet, he seemed very curious to discover the world. Rickon was distracting Ricard together with Shaggydog, and Edara was playing with her sisters Sarah and Birina and her cousins, his own daughters, Lyanna and Wenda. Sometimes he looked at Rob's eldest girl in shock at the fact that she was almost 12 years old by now. It was true that they had missed the first part of her life, but this seemed to go way too fast. Already lords had come to ask for her hand in name of their sons, but Rob had refused them all for now. He wanted her to remain a child for a little longer. Nevertheless, the same could be said about all the children. They all grew way too quickly. Lyanna was already 7 and his Wenda was 4. Bran had long married Bethany Blackwood and was a father in his own right now. Even Rickon had recently reached adulthood. Now, they were waiting for the birth of Rob's 5th child. He simply looked at his brother and king, as he kept pacing back and forth. Rob, Alis will be fine. Sit down and play with your children to distract yourself. She has gone through birth 4 times already without any severe issues. Today won't be any different. I must agree with John here, Rob. Alis and the child will be fine, you know this. Sir Brynden Tully told their king. However, Rob didn't seem to hear them at all. He just kept pacing around. Grey Wind was equally as agitated as his master was. At first, the other direwolves had tried to calm him, but they too had long given up and had chosen to keep the children company. Shaggy played some form of tag with Ricard and Rickon, whilst Brandon had laid little Bryn on Summer. The little boy was using the flank of the direwolf as a very oversized pillow, but neither of them seemed to mind as the boy curled up into the warmth of Summer's pelt. Ghost was watching his and Rob's daughters, as Edara was teaching them a new dance move that her dancing teacher had taught her. Rob was adored by his children, but even they knew better than to disturb him in this state. After a while, he simply gave up trying to talk to Rob and picked up his son. He carried him towards the girls. He left Ned with Ghost, in a very similar manner as Bryn was laying with Summer. Edara walked over towards him, after she gave the younger girls some move to exercise upon. The little girls were twisting, turning and laughing, but most were clearly too young for the move itself. Only Lionel seemed to grasp what her elder cousin wanted to teach her. Edda sat next to him on his newfound log and looked at Rob. Father is always like this when he worries about mother. She sighed. He put his right hand on her shoulder. Your father cares for your mother deeply. He doesn't want her or the baby to be hurt. He also has a small issue with being powerless. My brother is very good at fixing problems and taking action. However, this is something which he can't help your mother with, and it makes him like this. He said, whilst nodding in Rob's direction. He will quickly turn back to normal after the baby is born. Edara pulled closer to him and he pulled her against him in a small hug. You know, you could use this to your advantage. He grinned at her, getting only a questioned look from her in return. In a few days, after everything has gone well, you could tell him how you had to spend so much time with your sisters, brother and cousins whilst he was being worried. He'll probably feel guilty enough that you can convince him to go on a ride together, just the two of you. He pointed out. His little niece smiled at the prospect. She had loved riding from the moment she was old enough to try it, and before that. Firstly, she had ridden Grey Wind as a small child and now she had her own horse which she took on adventures. She was very similar to Arya in that regard, although Rob had confided in him that he had thanked the gods that she had only turned out half as wild as their little sister. The girl dutifully took her dancing and embroidery classes when needed, but in her free time she could also be seen running around with her friends. Arya had managed to make Alice agree to the idea that Edda should be able to defend herself, and as such archery and knife lessons had been added to her curriculum, a habit his own Lyra had quickly followed when she had become old enough. His daughters idolized the little girl next to him, he knew, as she served as their older sister in all but name when they were in Winterfell. He still spent the majority of his time in his ancestral home, although he made it a point to spend at least 2 months a year at Dragon's Lair. The people needed to know him and his family, and he had to oversee his lands. The summer years had been kind on his people and his keep was coming along well. His village had grown to a small town and the population of the entire area had significantly grown. Life was good, the harvests bountiful and the people happy. Still, they needed to prepare for winter as summer was expected to come to an end at any point. He shook away the thought and looked back to his niece, still holding his arm around her. Suddenly Rob stormed off, muttering something about needing to see Alice. The Blackfish shot him an apologetic glance, before quickly marching after him with Grey Wind. The commander shouted back to the other Kingsguard members, Morgan Barkley and Sir Dickon Brune, to keep watch over the rest of the royal family. Is father going to see mother? Edda asked. I think so. It seems your father's patience has run out. It reminds me of when we were children. He could have an impatient streak then as well. He laughed, which piqued his niece's curiosity. Could you tell me a story about when you and father and our uncles and aunts were little? She sweetly asked. He knew that that was the voice she used when she wanted to convince people to do things, but in this he did not mind. He told them the story about a snowball fight they had all had together when they were little and how Rob's impatience on executing a move had resulted in a snowball to his face from Sansa. Soon, all the girls had stopped dancing to sit at his side and listen to the stories. Bran and Rickon joined in not much later, and they spent the next couple of hours exchanging stories about how life had been for them growing up in Winterfell. Sarah, Rob's second daughter, seemed very interested in stories about her grandfather, and so he and his brothers told them all about Lord Eddard Stark. The stories that he and Bran told became so vivid, that it was almost like he was there with them for a moment. It only came to an end when Sir Dickon spoke up. Do I have permission to speak, Lord Whitefee? Of course, Sir Dickon. What is it? He responded. I think that it would be good for the children to eat something, my lord. You have been out here for a long time. The Knight of the Kingsguard told him, and he laughed softly. Not in a million years would I have thought that you would even defend the princesses' stomachs, Sir Dickon. The knight from Cracklaw Point smiled a cheeky smile. I defend the royal family from all threats. That also includes hunger, my lord. Rukun howled from laughter and Bran and him cracked a smile as well. Very well, would you children like to eat something? He asked. They all nodded, while Wenda dramatically grabbed her stomach. I am hungry, Farah. He grabbed his little girl in his arms and tickled her slightly. Then we will give you something to eat, my lady. He turned towards the others. Come, let's go. I'll tell the cooks to make you whatever you want. All the children cheered, as Bran smiled at him. Wyler probably won't like the meeting sweets again. He looked at his little brother. Wyler is busy and if she has anything to say about it, she can take care of all the children when Alis gives birth next. Bran lifted his eyebrows. When Alis gives birth next? He shrugged his shoulders. At this rate, who knows anymore? It's his 5th child already and judging by the sounds coming from their rooms sometimes I doubt it will be the last. He smiled cheekily. Both Brandon and Rukun laughed at that, remembering the incident half a year ago when the whole family had heard Alis. In private, Rob had told him that Alis was always hornier and louder when she was pregnant, but that he had felt ashamed to see them all looking at them at breakfast the next morning. He had simply laughed it off. He was king. He could do whatever he wanted and they, as his family, could laugh at whatever they wanted. They had something to eat and the cooks told him that the king had previously asked for food for him to be brought up to the queen's chambers, which meant they didn't need to expect him back soon. Afterwards, they all went into rooms normally designated for diplomats and visitors far away from the family rooms as not to disturb Alis. There, he read stories about the kings of winter to Edara, Ricard and Lyanna. Wenda, Sarah and Birina played a game with Rukun, whilst Bran was caring for his son Brynden and his own boy Edric. This is how Rob found them sometime later. He looked tired and had fading lines of worry on his face, yet when he looked at them a smile the width of his face appeared. He stood up immediately. How's Alis? And the baby? He asked. Alis is tired, but healthy. She has gone to sleep. He looked towards his son and daughters, who had also gotten up and started bombarding him with questions. Your mother is well, but she needs her rest right now. Soon, we will all go to her together, but first I need you to say hi to your new brother. It was only then that he noticed the small bundle in his brother's arms. The children all ran to him and very carefully he showed them the little boy's face. What is he called, father? Edara asked him immediately after looking upon her brother's sleeping form. Rob looked away from his daughter into his eyes. John, he is called John after your uncle. His eyes grew wide as he looked upon his brother and nephew and a lump suddenly formed in his throat. Rob walked over to him and showed him the sleeping figure of his newest nephew. Meet John Stark, brother. Rob stretched out his arms as a signal for him to take the boy and he did so as a habit, as Wyler had often done the same with their children. He looked upon his nephew in his arms and looked back into the blue eyes of his brother. John Stark. John Stark. A great name, don't you think? He grinned. His response was a perplexed look he gave back, but after a while he just smiled emotionally. He gave his nephew back to his brother and whispered words of gratitude to him. Rob just laughed it off. Alis and I had decided on the name years ago. If Sarah or Birina had been a boy, they would have been called John. This was not a spur-of-the-moment thing, John. My son has been named after a great man and a true Northman. I couldn't think of a better role model for him. The lump in his throat forbade him to say anything in response, so he just nodded meaningfully. He went to sit down as the rest of the family doted on the little boy. After a while, Rob left with promises for his children that he would be back to take them to their mother soon. Bran and Rukun soon took places next to him and patted him on his shoulders. You deserve it, John. Without your help, Rob might have never made it back north. Everybody knows this. You are our brother and now we have a second John in the family. He smiled at his little brothers, before walking out to catch his breath and leaving the children under their care. He strode over to the walls of Winterfell and climbed on top of a guard tower. The young guard greeted him, and he nodded back. They silently stood vigil next to each. Not for the first time, his gaze soon wandered west to where his lands were far beyond the horizon. He thought of how far he had come and what his mother and uncle would have had to say about it. He hoped they would be proud. Suddenly, Lioness stood next to him. She had said nothing, and he hadn't heard her arrive. She simply pulled her arms around him, and he and his eldest daughter looked across the horizon to the glowing hills and forests that made up the lands around Winterfell. 3 months later. Bran. The harvest feast had finally arrived. It would be the first time that Little John would be presented to the realm, and the whole family was excited for it. All northern families had sent word that a representative would be sent to Winterfell, whilst many Riverlander families did the same. After almost 6 years of summer, most expected it to end soon, so for many in the south it would be the last time to be able to easily come north. Bethany was excited, as 3 of her brothers would be coming to the harvest feast. Lord Brynden Blackwood would make the trip north with his family, his bookish brother Hoster would govern Blackwood Vale until his return. Their brother Lord Lucas Goodwood, formerly Blackwood, had left his family at home and made one of his friends the Castellan until his return. Brynden would bring his younger brother Edmund with him. Sir Edmund was 2 years older than him and had always been adventurous. He had made the trip north before and had even travelled further to the Wall a few years back. Both Alan and Bethany were looking forward to their reunion. It would be the first time that the Blackwood brothers saw their new nephew, and he looked forward to it. House Blackwood was a prestigious house and a good ally to have. He hoped that his children would foster good relations with both branches of their mother's house, as it could do wonders for their future. Whilst most guests had already arrived, the Blackwoods had been delayed by small problems at home and would only arrive this afternoon. He walked across the yard and saw the sigil of all the different houses. Sir Benedict Blackwood, his wife's cousin and his trusted personal shield for years, walked next to him. Robb had ordered all the members of the Kingsguard to be very alert the coming weeks, as it would be the prime opportunity for enemies to slip spies and assassins among their lord's retainers. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the howl of a direwolf coming from the fields in the distance. Its sound was unmistakably one of theirs, as was shown by the fact that 4 direwolves howled back in response from all over the castle. He pressed down into the back of his mind for a split second and saw through Summer's eyes. He was watching over Bethany and Bryn. His boy was babbling away in his crib, whilst Bethany was doing embroidery with Sansa. He pulled out of Summer's mind again, knowing that everything was well. He changed his course towards the gate and Sir Benedict followed without him having to say a word. The guards were already standing in a sort of honor guard by the time he arrived. Moments later, his younger brother lazily rode through the gate. He was accompanied by a group of nobles that he recognized as Roger Ryswell, House Ryswell's heir, and William and Denise Dustin, Roderick Dustin's 2 sons, and some noble companions of theirs. Both families had brought retainers with them as well. Next to Rookon, Shaggy trotted. Shaggy had become massive, only Grey Wind was larger than him now, as he now matched even Ghost. The direwolf sniffed at him and looked around for Summer. He petted his brother's wild wolf and whispered in his ear. "Summer is with the pack, you will see him soon." Shaggy's intelligent eyes looked deeply into his own and he exhaled loudly through his nose once in response that he understood. Rookon elegantly jumped from the saddle. He walked over to him and hugged him. Rookon was now 16 years old and still as wild as he had been as a child. Robb and Mother often struggled to rein him in. In return to agreeing to some of their requests, they allowed him to go on adventures from time to time. The past 5 weeks his brother had been exploring the Barrowlands and the Rills. It had been sold to the family as a compromise, but it had been more of a necessity. Rookon had snuck out thrice before the age of 14, once travelling alone as far as the Dread Fort. Robb had had search parties sent to look for him, but it had been in vain that time. They had been worried sick, although the bond the direwolves shared told them that Rookon and Shaggy had been healthy and were somewhere to the east. The other times that he snuck out, to Castle Sewin and the Wolf's Wood, he had been tracked down quickly by Jon, but that last time they had not been able to find him until they had received a raven from Sansa and Domeric weeks later that he had arrived at their home. After that, he was allowed to go on adventures but never again alone. From over Rookon's shoulder, he saw Morgan Barclay. The trusted Kingsguard always accompanied Rookon on his new exploits and his clothes looked just as worn down as his brother's. Over the past 18 months alone, his little brother had travelled to Clan Barclay and to Torrens Square. He had accompanied John to see Dragon Point and he himself had accompanied him to White Harbor and Moat Cailin. Now he came back from the Barrowlands. He greeted the Riswells and Dustins, as they politely bowed in front of him. He quickly organized for their men to be taken to the barracks and their noble friends to rooms prepared for lower nobles. Then he walked them to the keep to show them to their prepared chambers. Just as they were about to enter, John walked out in a hurry. "Ah, Lords Riswell and Dustin, it is good to see you. Excuse me for not greeting you at the gate. We hadn't expected you until hours later." Roger Riswell waved John's apologies away. "No offense taken, Lord John. The young prince wanted to make haste in returning home. We flew across the lands the last 2 days and made good speed. You couldn't have known." John raised his eyebrow at Rookon, who simply laughed and hugged him in greeting. "Nonetheless, I will quickly rectify my mistake and take care of your men." Now it was William Dustin's turn to wave away John's concern. "Prince Brandon has been so kind to see to that already, Lord Hand. We are all in order. If you could just take us to our rooms, all else has already been taken care of." John looked at him and nodded in thanks. He just smiled in response. "Of course, Lord Dustin, I will take the 3 of you to your rooms immediately. That will give you the opportunity to wash of your travels." "I will do the same, John. I would kill for a bath and a mug of ale." Rookon joked. John simply shook his head. "Maybe you shouldn't ride as a crazed animal then or force the northern nobility to follow you in doing so. I bet 50 golden wolves that you slaved your horse to near exhaustion again." He said it disapprovingly, but it was clear that there was no real menace in the comment. Rookon smiled innocently and quipped back. "I assure you that pony is in very good shape. By now, she will enjoying a very well-deserved bale of hay." He rolled his eyes at the name his brother had given to his large black destrier. The horse had been a gift from Rob for his 16th birthday. Throughout the years, his little brother had been teased about the name Shaggydog. So, he thought it funny to double down and call his majestic new mount Pony. John seemed to roll his eyes as well. "You do that, brother. Take 2 baths to be sure, I wouldn't want you to stink of horse at the feast." He responded with a wink. Denies Dustin, a good friend of Rookon, snickered at the comment and Rookon threw an annoyed look back. Knowing full well how easy his younger brother was to anger, he placed a hand on his shoulder. "John, if you show our guests to their rooms then I will take care of our little wolf pup here. I'll make sure that he gets to the feast on time and he won't smell of horse, I promise." He winked at his older brother, who laughed. He pinched his Rookon's shoulder and pushed him towards the entrance of the keep before he could reply. Barkley and Shaggy quickly followed them. He looked back at the direwolf. "Summer is with Lady in Song's rooms. You can go to them if you want to." Shaggy looked over to Rookon for permission, which his younger brother granted with a nod. The direwolf stalked off, his tail happily waggling at the idea of seeing his brother and sister again. Over the years, it had become clear to everyone that their bond with the direwolves was unnatural. Rookon had been too young to hide it and he and Arya had made mistakes too. All of the Kingsguard were aware of it, whether they knew it to be warging or something else, and many of their friends and nobles too. Rob told him that he explained everything to their great-uncle, after he had seen Shaggy do things for Rookon without a single word. The Blackfish had been shaken for a few days but had accepted it in the end. He had had to tell Bethany and Alan too, as they had noticed unnatural things about him and Summer too. The only one in the family who was still mildly oblivious was their mother, but it was more because she didn't want to notice. She was still zealously loyal to her 7 and couldn't comprehend the power the old gods had granted them. He walked through the halls and put his arm around his younger brother. Rookon told him his stories about the Barrowlands. How he had captured a small group of 3 thieves in some village along a river and met up with a few of the noble youths from the area. His brother seemed to be very skilled in garnering companions wherever he went. He always found the most brazen and mischievous boys and convinced them to follow him. 2nd and 3rd sons with a sense of adventure and not enough to lose when they got into trouble with Rookon. Of course, there wasn't much that Rookon couldn't solve with his title of prince, his direwolf and the word of his Kingsguard. The only 2 people in the world that still scared his little brother were Rob and Mother, in that order. They entered Rookon's rooms, and his brother threw off his riding clothes until only his undergarments were left. He didn't care, they had seen each other naked hundreds of times throughout the years. He called the servants to pour his brother a bath, as they kept talking. Rukun had wanted to visit the family first, but he had managed to convince him to bath first. In the end Rukun had relented, as he had had to acknowledge that he hadn't bathed since leaving Winterfell except for once swimming in a cold river. Mother would strangle him for the way he smelled now that the castle was chock full of nobles. After an hour, Rukun followed him to Sansa's chambers. There, they found their sister with her 3 children Bethany, Barbary and Baltasar. 7-year-old Bethany, whom they all called Beth to prevent confusion, ran over to him. "Uncle Bran," she shouted as she tackled his left leg. Her 3-year-old sister Barbary mimicked her and tackled his other leg. "Well, hello there, little nieces of mine. How goes your embroidery?" He responded and they both started blabbering about what they had made. During the conversation he shared a smile with his own Bethany, his wife. Sansa only had eyes for their little brother, as she hugged him. "You have gotten big, Rukun. You tower over me by now. We expected you sooner, as Shaggy has been here for over an hour. Where were you?" "Bran and Jon forced me to take a bath first, apparently I stunk." He responded with a shrug. Little Beth and Barbary laughed. "Uncle Rukun stinky." Barbary Bolton screamed. Sansa gave their brother a disapproving look, as she picked up her daughter and told her kindly to be quiet. Shaggy had come up behind Rukun, with Summer coming up behind him and hugging his shoulder. He scratched his direwolf behind his ears lovingly and thanked him for keeping his family safe. He walked over to his wife and kissed her softly, before taking their son out of her arms. He placed the boy on his chest, and little Bryn babbled happily at the sight of his father. He was still too small to say words, but that didn't stop him from trying. They spent the next 2 hours like that, until they were joined by Arya and her young son Meager. Meager was almost 3 years old and Clee's pride. Arya herself was very happy to have a son and she let him do everything she hadn't been allowed to do as a girl and more. The boy was by now a professional direwolf rider and loved to go on adventures with his mother and Nymeria. They saw each other often, as Arya visited Winterfell at least a few days every month, usually taking little Meager with her. Clee they saw less often, but still a lot more than Sansa or Domeric. He himself had travelled to Castle Sewin too and he loved the home Arya had built for herself there. Meager screamed more wolves, as he entered the room and sprinted over to first hug Summer, then Lady and then Shaggy. They all allowed him to do so and soon the spirited boy found other prey. "Cousins!" He continued screaming and he ran over to hug Beth, Barbary and little Baltasar in Sansa's arms. After giving his auntie Sassa a kiss on her cheek, he greeted him and Bethany and gave Bryn a cute little kiss on his forehead. However, it seemed that the boy had intentionally kept the best for last. He ran to the other side of the room and put his back to the wall. He breathed in heavily and sprinted across the room shouting, "Uncle Rukun!" Rukun picked him up and threw him 3 feet in the air before catching him effortless. The boy giggled loudly, and he looked upon the spectacle fondly. You could say a lot about Rukun's ways, but not that he didn't love his family. Arya laughed proudly at the scene her son made, whilst Sansa tried to berate her that he should behave himself. Although it had to be said, even Sansa didn't seem to mean it. Arya laughed it off. "I will raise my own son, Aunt Sassa." He laughed loudly at the joke and soon they started swapping stories whilst Meager played with his cousins and the direwolves. Time seemed to fly by when they were together. It seemed like only minutes had passed before they parted ways to ready themselves and their children for the feast. He took pride in dressing his baby boy in stark grey clothes lined with white. Bethany had sewn the clothes herself and she had done a terrific job. His wife was dressed in a beautiful black and grey dress with red lining. The dress combined the stark grey which he and his siblings themselves often combined with black, together with the black and red of House Blackwood. She looked magnificent and he told her so. For just a moment, her cheeks turned the color of her father's house. She said nothing but gave him a passionate kiss in response. He himself put on a grey and white tunic that matched his son's and combined it with dark grey and black pants that matched his wife's dress. He picked up his boy on his right arm and put his left arm through Bethany's. They walked towards the hall. His squire, a grandson of Lady Lysa Flint, announced his arrival, whilst Summer trailed behind them scanning the room for possible threats. They took their seats at the high table, which had become very crowded now that their families had been expanded so much. It had even forced Rob to seat the Carstarks and his advisors at their own tables, and his mother had gone as far as to propose to seat Jon at a lower table close to them, but Rob had vetoed it. "Jon is my hand of the king, and he is family besides. Whether he is seen as my brother or cousin, it matters not. He is part of the pack and his place is with us, the same goes for his family." He had heard him tell their mother. He agreed with his brother wholeheartedly on the subject. Rob was seated in the middle, with Jon sat at his right and 7-year-old Rookie on his left. Alis sat on the other side of their heir with little Jon in her arms. Their daughters sat together with Jon and Sansa's daughters at the edge of the table with Mother, Wyler and a few maids looking after them. Bethany and Brynn were seated there too. He took his place next to Jon with Rickon beside him. Sansa, Domeric, Arya and Clee with their infant sons completed that side of the table. Their great-uncle stood before the table with 3 other Kingsguard, with 2 others at every side. The 2 remaining Kingsguard stood at the entrance, one of them being the newest member Sir Edmund Grey. The knight hailed from the Riverlands from the small noble family of House Grey. He was one of the younger grandsons of its ailing lord and had dutifully served in the Kingsguard for the last 3 years. He was the only member that hadn't fought in Rob's wars, as he had still been too young. The feast went well. The nobles seemed to be enjoying themselves, and certain groups of Riverlanders, mainly centered around houses Blackwood, Peage and Riker, were mingling easily with the northern nobility. After a while, people started moving around and he got up as well to walk down to a Riverlander's table where his friends Lord Miles Mouton, Lord Limandiari were sitting together with his in-laws. On the way there, he greeted his uncle Lord Ed Muirtully on a closer table that he passed by. Bethany and Brynn joined him too and they were all having fun together. He even showed his brothers-in-law how to interact with Summer. This all changed when Grey Wind suddenly howled loudly. All people stopped talking and looked over to the high table expectantly. Rob stood up from his seat and walked around to the front of the table until he stood at the edge of the dais. He looked imposing, with 2 Kingsguard at either side in front of him and Grey Wind next to him. He looked at Summer, as he saw his companion move towards Rob. He tugged him in his mind to stay here, as he didn't want to make a scene, but the direwolf fought back and told him to come with him. "My brother calls us." Summer told him in the back of his mind, which made no sense. He looked perplexed as his direwolf stalked further forward. "Prince Brandon Stark, come forward." Rob suddenly bellowed from his position. He looked at his brother and then at Bethany, who urged him to go to the front. He gave Brynn to his uncle Alan and stood up. He slowly walked forward until he stood before the 4 Kingsguard members. Rob looked sternly with his hands behind his back, as he paused. "Prince Brandon, my brother, you have proven yourself to be loyal and capable in many ways. You have successfully completed missions in my name and the name of our house to the Riverlands, White Harbor and Moat Cailin. You have tied House Stark together with the Riverlands once more with your marriage to the lovely Bethany. This has already resulted in a son named Bryndon. Scarcely anyone here could have thought of a better name for the product of such a union." He saw how the Blackfish flashed a little smirk at that, although he kept standing still. "I would ask you to kneel, brother. You have long been deserving of a reward and today you shall get it." He looked perplexed at Rob, but he simply motioned for him to kneel down. He did so and Rob stepped down to the floor until he was in front of him. "My brother Brandon has shown himself as a capable bridge between the 2 peoples that have assembled here today. As a Stark, he is firmly rooted in the north. Nevertheless, he has a Riverlander mother, a Riverlander wife, has been raised in Riverrun for years and has forged bonds with the young generation of nobles there that many of us can only envy. It is partly this, but most of all it is his loyalty and intelligence, that has driven me to award him today," Rob declared pompously, as he desperately tried to figure out what this meant. "There is a fortress here in the north that is often described as the gateway to the north. However, I consider it more to be the land bridge between the north and the Riverlands." Rob went on and his own eyes grew wide, as he realized where Rob was going with this. "The fortress and the surrounding lands need a lot of work, and I would ask my brother to make it his life work to rebuild it. In return, I would like to call him the Master of Moat Cailin for his lifetime. All the incomes the area and its surrounding lands brings in will be his from now until his death. Additionally, he will rewarded with a large dotation as well, to help him organize his household and repopulate the lands sworn to the fortress. Upon his death, the fortress will revert back to the crown, but I personally swear an oath that little Prince Brindon and all his future brothers and sisters will be taken care of by Winterfell as befitting of their royal status. Robb spoke to the hall. He hadn't known anything about this and almost panicked on what to do. Yet, his older brother and king addressed him then. "Brother, will you accept this honor?" He looked up towards Robb and they shared a look of understanding. He took a deep breath. "I will, Your Grace," he responded loudly. Robb smiled at him and pulled a parchment from behind his back. He ceremoniously awarded it to him. Before he could read it, his brother bellowed loudly again. "Now rise, Prince Brandon Stark, Master of Moat Cailin and Keeper of the Bridge between our peoples." He stood up in a daze and his brother hugged him. "We will talk more on the details tomorrow. I expect that you and your wife will be very happy. I have been more than generous." He spoke, and he added a wink at the end as he pulled back from him. He saw the encouraging smiles of his family before he walked back towards his wife at the Blackwood table. They all congratulated him, but before he could read the document together with his wife, Robb called out loudly again. "Sir Alan Blackwood, step forward." He looked at his best friend and brother-in-law. Alan looked back at him and looked just as shocked as he was. His face seemed to scream at him to help him what to do, so he just gave him a little shove in the right direction. Alan slowly walked forward until he was in front of Robb. "Sir Alan Blackwood, kneel," their king told him, and he went to one knee. "For your loyal service to my brother and House Stark, I have decided to award you with lands. You will receive an area of 250 square miles of land to the east of Moat Cailin. You are given permission to develop settlements, as well as farming and forestry opportunities on the lands as you see fit. You will receive a one-time sum of 3,000 gold wolves to aid you in this purpose. Once you agree, you and your descendants will in perpetuity be sworn to Winterfell and the Masters of Moat Cailin. Do you accept this honor on the single condition that you choose a new noble name for your line to distinguish yours from your brothers?" Alan looked perplexed, but soon a gigantic grin spread over his face. He could immediately see that his three brothers looked equally as happy for him. Alan was a fourth son and had never been expected to hold any lands, neither big nor minor. For a northerner noble, 250 square miles was not that much, and it entirely depended on how fertile and populated the area was. However, the riverlands were much smaller and more densely populated, so for them the territory seemed a much greater gift. Nevertheless, Alan had become a landed noble in the blink of an eye, a thing which he had never imagined. He suddenly had lands that could be passed through to his descendants. Alan bowed even deeper. "I accept, Your Grace. I thank you for the honor that you bestow upon me, and I swear to you that me and mine will forever be loyal to Winterfell." Robb smiled. "I in turn swear that you and yours will forever have a place at my heart. Now rise, Master Alan, and let it be known that you are now part of the landed gentry of the north." Whilst Alan stood up, many started to cheer. The loudest screamers were those at his table, consisting of Alan's family and friends, but many other Riverlanders and Northerners also cheered. Many of the latter had come to know Alan through his service in the household at Winterfell and knew him to be steadfast and loyal. Robb looked back at the hall and clapped in his hands. "Now let the feast continue." He took his seat again and the hall erupted once more in song and chatter, as dozens of men came to congratulate him. Over the course of the night, he had lengthy conversations with his brothers-in-law, as well as Roderick Dustin and Lord Wyman Marndale. His lands would border theirs, and as such they were more than interested in his plans for the area. They gave him many suggestions and he had promised to visit them soon to discuss all things in more detail once he had made up his mind on what he would do. He celebrated long into the night, all of his friends drinking more than they should have. The next morning, he only got up late. He shared his breakfast with Rickon, whose head seemingly hurt even more than his. Afterwards, he went to look for Robb. He found his brother in his solar in talks with John, Roderick Dustin, Roger Risswell and Lady Alysanne Shield. Robb invited him in. Now that you will have to take care of lands of your own, you can learn something from this, as we are talking about infrastructure. They talked about the roads in the west of the kingdom, running in part through Dragon's Lair, Barrowton, Riders Spring and Sunset Harbor, and how improvements were faring. It seemed that the works between Riders Spring and Barrowton had finished, whilst the Dustins had also successfully improved their connectivity to Moat Cailin and the King's Road. The road between Torrens Square and Barrowton was almost done, and the road between Riders Spring and the Sunset Harbor, the new seat of House Shield, was around halfway finished. After half an hour, the lords departed, and he was left alone with Rob and John. John picked up a few maps from inside Rob's desk. He laid them out on the table. The area sworn to Moat Cailin is relatively small for northern high nobility. Rob started off. It encompasses this area. His brother told him, as he encircled the borders with his finger. The surface is around 11,500 square miles, of which around 10,000 is fertile or wooded. The other parts are mostly outliers of the swamps or some rivers and small lakes. He nodded at his brother, to show that he was listening and understood. He had passed through these lands half a dozen times already on his way to the Riverlands, and Rob had sent him on mission there last year, which had him inspect and document the lay of the land for him. The lands are unique in another way, that there are scarcely any lower nobility present. Many have died out over the centuries or abandoned the lands, and our ancestors never saw fit to name new ones. The result of it is twofold. 1. The area is scarcely populated, and those people that do live there are fiercely independent. 2. This gives a lot of opportunities to reward people and mold the hierarchic structure to our liking, like I started when granting lands to Alan. Thank you again for that. It means a lot to him. He responded. Rob waved it off. The lands that I awarded to Alan are over here. He continued, pointing to some lands to the east of the moat. It's around 250 miles, of which almost 90% is fertile enough. Now, including Alan, 1,500 square miles are ruled by lower nobles. Over the next decades, I would propose that we improve that to 5,000 square miles, or almost half of the lands, with the other part ruled by the master of Moat Cailin directly. This will ensure continuity once a new master takes power, while not encroaching on his power that much. He nodded in agreement. Do you have people in mind? Rob nodded. But we'll get to that. The other lower nobility are composed of 6 families, 4 of them are situated in the east next to the Mandaeli lands, and they have strong ties with noble families there. For the other 2 it is the Dustin lands. It will be your first job to promote intermingling between those 6 families and new nobles we award lands to. Promote marriages and fosterings between them, and create a court and household where they can meet each other. This will help you to rule more effectively and will in time lessen the Mandaelis and Dustins' influence where it shouldn't be. Those areas are Stark lands and no one else's. Rob looked up to him if he agreed, and he nodded again. The other lands where I would establish lower families are the northern edges, a small part in the northwest, and these lands in the east around Alan's lands. I awarded Alan the lands closest to the moat that I thought we would give out, so that he is close to you at all times. He smiled. I appreciate that, and he will too. I will still count on him to help me rule the lands and the future keep. The closer his lands are, the easier this will be. Now it was Rob's turn to nod. However, this has one annoying side effect. The lands furthest away from the moat are the most populated ones. In total, there are some 25,000 people living in the area. 40% of those are living in the lands of those 6 families, and if we raise nobles on all the designated areas, they will account for just under 50% of the lands, but over 90% of the people. He snapped his eyes to his brother. That would leave me without a population to directly rule over. I would be hard-pressed to find maids, servants and guardsmen, let alone produce enough food to sustain them or my family. He blurted out. That is why Winterfell will subsidize you with 12,000 golden wolves a year and will organize a continued stream of migration towards the area. The immediate 450 square mile area around Moat Cailin has only 5 small hamlets, one of which was built on Father's orders and by Rob's measures when Father was in King's Landing. Yet, we are in the process of forming a 6th one at the base of the moat with all the necessities to grow in a thriving village. John responded. His eyes went wide. That is a fortune you would be spending on the ruler of a non-existent keep. It is. However, I expect you to use the coin to better the lands, not to live an easy life in luxury. You are expected to clear lands, settle immigrants coming from other parts of the north and make the keep livable. The majority of the coin should go that way. I understand, Rob, and it is a very considerable sum, but it is not enough to rebuild the fortress, not by a long shot. He retorted. Rob smiled. I know that, Bran. Funds for that will be freed too, but they will not be included in your personal coin. Those 12,000 are to do with what you see best. You will be living on the lands and will soon know best what needs to happen to establish your authority, settle a solid base of small folk and create a functional household. The other funds outside of those 12,000 will go to what I decree, although I will always value your opinion greatly on the topic. He thought that over. It sounded interesting. Where would my household establish itself for now then? In the 3 remaining towers. We used them on our royal progression south 5 years ago and when marching to war a decade ago. The gatehouse tower is strong and sturdy and was fixed by our father years ago. Some of the walls around it still stand strong and a small temporary keep could be established there. The 2 other towers could temporarily be used to house guards and servants, they too were restored by father. Rob responded. Father had also allowed for an inn and a stable to be constructed just north of the keep, close enough to serve travelers coming through, whilst far enough away to not hinder any possible future reconstruction. The Ironborn burned all of it down, but it has since been rebuilt and expanded with a few houses including a blacksmith and a tanner. They should form the core of a future village or preferably even a town to be established to the north of the fortress. This could in time give you manpower, income and trade power, but it will take years to reach that point. John continued. That's why I want you on the ground there. Neither I nor John can do it and I would only trust a Stark with Moat Cailin. You have proven yourself capable and I trust you completely, little brother. You also deserve a place of your own. In a decade, maybe 2, we aim that the area will start to produce real coin. That coin, minus taxes of course, will be yours and yours alone. The position will allow you to earn coin that you can set aside for your children to use. It will also give you addition prestige which will give you the possibility to create a better future for Bryn and other children that might follow without being solely reliant on me. Rob finished. So, I would hold Moat Cailin till my death, no matter the circumstances or the riches it makes. He asked his elder brother and king. As long as you don't forsake your oaths to Winterfell, nobody can or will take it from you. Not even my heirs, if I were to die. He replied. If the fortress has been rebuilt, this would place me in a very strong position in a situation should something happen to you. I would hold the keys to the north, and I would be Rookie's uncle and a Stark. He countered matter-of-factly. You would. I have the uttermost trust in you and wouldn't want anyone else there. Do not think I have not considered this. You have deserved this, and you will do well, Bran. He smiled at both his brothers, because he could see they both truly meant what they said. However, he still had to protect his family. What would happen after I were to die? What happens to my children? What if I die young without being able to amass any coin? Rob simply raised his eyebrow. All you leave behind would be divided under your sons, whilst some coin would be taken out to ensure great dowries for your daughters. If the sum would prove insufficient, their remaining dowries would be paid by Winterfell. Your daughters will be princesses of the blood Bran. Every lord would jump at the possibility to marry a niece of mine or Rookie's cousin in combination with a good dowry. Your sons will be offered positions in Winterfell going from the household to the council, depending on their capabilities. They will be given coin as members of the royal families and will be trusted with diplomatic missions like you and Rookon now. In the end, they could buy lands or businesses and settle anywhere they desire in the kingdom. However, they will not inherit Moat Cailin. He nodded at that, as he was happy with the answer. Then who will? His elder brother shrugged. I don't know yet. Maybe little baby John will. Maybe one of Rookie's or little John's sons. That is a decision that we won't need to make the next 20 or 30 years. I expect you to take control of the area for at least that time, preferably much longer. Rob winked at him, and John rolled his eyes at their brother. Do you have any more questions? John asked him. Where do I start? Do you give me the maps of the area and possible lords to negotiate with to allow some of their farmers to move to the lands? Can Maester Lewin help? He fired off in quick succession. Rob laughed. Well, you should start with this. He handed him a bunch of documents. These are Father and Maester Lewin's plans for Moat Cailin. Their assessments on what to do with the roads, the lands, the population and the fortress. I have included another document proposing the plan that John, Lewin, Uncle Bryndon, Roderick and I made for repopulating the area. I want the documents back in time, but for the next few weeks you can study them and look it over. You could ask Maester Lewin to copy them as well. Rob and I will take care of the first wave of migrants to the area. We will send mostly people from Stark and Sewin lands to make sure they are loyal. We have also made a list of people from the Winterfell area we might consider for some of the lands that we are planning to give out. Rob has included it, as well. Look it over and let us know what you think about them. They will be your main vassals, so consider them well. John added. He accepted the papers and thanked his brothers. I think I have a lot of work cut out for me. The next couple of days you will be able to find me at my desk in my rooms. He laughed. He stood up and walked out. Whilst walking through the hallways, he browsed through the papers and recognized his father's handwriting on some of them. He decided he would look these over for the rest of the day and discuss them tomorrow with Bethany and Alan. Maybe his other good brothers could give him some advice as well, two were successful lords after all. He would go back to Rob and John with a plan and show them that he was worth all of this. Chapter 78, The Result of a Dream. 13f. There is a 2-year time jump since last chapter. Bran. Everything was dark. He could see nothing wherever he looked. He tried to look at his own hands, but although he felt them, he saw no sign of them no matter how hard he waved them in front of his eyes. He wandered around in the dark, not knowing what to make of all of this. A white light could be seen in the distance. He looked over towards it and realized it was getting closer quickly. No, he was getting closer to the light, not the light to him. He was floating through the dark. How this happening? He did not know. As he got closer, he realized that the white light was coming from 2 weirwood trees. He recognized them as the 2 trees that stood just east of Moat Cailin. They got closer and closer, and he became afraid that he would smash into them. However, magically, he stopped just in front of them. He looked upon the 2 painted faces side by side. One had a sad face, the other a happy one. He was comparing the details when the 2 pairs of eyes abruptly opened and stared at him. The shock caused him to fall backwards, yet the trees just stared at him. Suddenly both mouths, sad and happy, opened and a voice came out. The voice sounded strange, both as if it was one voice and dozens together at the same time. Brandon Stark, the voice exclaimed loudly, and he felt all the hairs in his body stand up in response. You have been summoned. We have a task for you. Do not disappoint us. Your family may suffer if you do. In a flash, the weirwood trees were gone. He found himself in the Godswood of Winterfell. He knew where he was. The weirwood was to his back and he wanted to turn himself towards it, but something else caught his eye. Shapes moved through the trees towards him. 6 in total, the 6 direwolves he and his siblings had raised. At the front walked Grey Wind, with Summer and Ghost at his sides. They stopped a few feet from him. This is what could happen if you ignore our message. A booming voice called from behind him. He instinctively knew that it was the weirwood who spoke to him. He didn't have the time to turn around, as Summer stalked forward towards him and put his paw on his forehead. Suddenly, images flashed in front of him. He saw himself, Rob and all his other siblings. He saw how they got older and how the small children that walked beside them grew up quickly. In shock, he realized that he saw Edda and Rookie as adults. He saw himself with a young boy. The boy grew up into an adult and he found himself old and grey lying in a bed, whilst holding the much older boy's hand. Bryndon, my son, I must leave you now. The gods call for me to join them. He heard the elderly version of himself say. His eyes grew wide. Bryndon was only 3 years old, here he looked at least 40. He saw how his boy nodded, a tear streaking over his cheek. He saw himself die, as his son closed his eyes forever. Instantly, he saw Ricard, who did the same to Rob. Edric to John, Beth to Sansa, Meager to Arya, and a boy he didn't know to Rickon. He saw how his siblings' eyes were all closed by their children. Suddenly, he saw their direwolves, and they illuminated a white light through their eyes before the light extinguished, and the direwolves turned to dust. He saw their children gather in Winterfell, as Rob's body was set in the crypt. Next, he saw an elderly rookie with an adult son and another small boy next to him, as he sat on the throne of the Kings of Winter. Rob's future line, he realized. He looked around and saw Brynden stand in the hall. An elderly woman approached the throne. She spoke to Ricard, and grey mist came from her mouth. The real direwolves died together with your father and his siblings. The line that had been reforged has ended prematurely. The gods didn't intend for this. They will shed tears for their followers, they will shed tears for the fate of your family. The woman fell down on the ground, as the sound of direwolves howling filled the hall. The woman was dead, he realized. Then the images started flashing even quicker. He saw armies marching. Battles being fought. He saw the adult man and the boy that he had seen next to Rookie, but they had aged at least 15 years. They fought side by side, killing indiscriminately, but the enemies were too many. The older died first, soon followed by his son. He saw dozens of weirwoods in flames at once, as he heard dozens of voices scream their pain and sorrow in his eyes. He saw Castle Sewin and the dread fort as mere ruins. He saw a battle at Moat Cailin. The direwolf banner of his house flew high above the highest tower. The fortress was stormed from all sides, and in a flash the battle was over, with thousands of bodies lying scattered in and around the fortress. The image zoomed in on one. He saw a greybeard lying dead in the middle of the courtyard. He wore the tabard of House Stark, but the direwolf it displayed was pierced by 1,000 cuties. The dead greybeard opened his eyes, but they were all white and saw nothing. A voice came out of his dead mouth. I have failed you, father. I couldn't protect our family. Please forgive me. He realized that he looked upon the old dead body of his little boy, and tears streaked across his face. He tried to grab his son's face, but he couldn't get closer. His body drifted in the sky away from the moat, and the further he could look, the more destruction he saw. He saw people running for their life, being hunted down by fanatically motivated enemies. He saw the Wolfswood burning down, and the old burial hills of the Barrow Kings uprooted. His body moved north, and he saw the wall melt down. New enemies pouring through it to attack from the north side. The north was stormed by zealous armies wearing the 7-point star from the south, as pirates and raiders landed on their shores from the east and the west. He saw Ricard, Rob's happy little boy, stand upon the biggest tower in Winterfell. He looked old and frail. He saw enemies swarm over the walls of Winterfell, as his nephew fell to his knees and cry. He saw how he clutched his heart, whilst screaming loudly. He saw Rob's eldest son die from sorrow, as his home burned down. He saw his homeland go up in flames as far as he could look in every direction, but suddenly it was all gone again. He found himself back in the Godswood in Winterfell, as summer pulled his paw back from his forehead. You have seen what could be if you refuse to fulfill our task. A booming voice shouted. He turned around and saw the melancholy face of the Winterfell Heart Tree talk to him. You must travel north. Go beyond the wall and find the direwolf's future. Your elder brother Rob must accompany you. Together you can save the north from its fate. The reforged line must not be broken yet. The next generation will need their guidance and assistance, or they may fail. Now go and fulfill the task we asked of you. We count on you. The eyes of the weirwood turned wider and wider, and a great white flash threw him back. He felt himself fall down and couldn't manage to open his eyes. Abruptly, he felt himself hit the ground. He opened his eyes and found himself laying in his bed in Moat Cailin. He grasped for air, breathing heavily. Bethany's face was hunched over him, and she looked scared. Bran. Bran, are you there? Can you hear me? She asked carefully. He nodded in response, whilst trying to calm his breathing. What was that? You started sweating buckets and I couldn't wake you. In the end, you just started screaming loudly. A few seconds ago, Your whole body flinched together as if you smacked into something. He looked up to his wife in shock. Or as if I fell down. He whispered. She nodded strangely. That may describe it even better. What happened? He looked around him and noticed how a large area of the mattress around him was drenched in sweat. His hair was wet as if he had just taken a swim. His back hurt, as if he had really fallen, and he noticed tears streaking from his eyes. He looked back at his wife. I think the gods visited me in my dreams. They send me a warning and a task. If I fail, House Stark and the North may be in peril. If I fail, Brynden could die trying to fight it, Rookie and his children Kumdal too. Our son would die, Bethany. He would die on these grounds in this castle fighting against a tide of enemies that he can't stop. Bethany's eyes went wide in shock. She listened to him ramble. The gods visited you. You mean the old gods? He nodded, as he swallowed loudly. He jumped out of the bed. I must go to Winterfell at once. I need to talk to Robb. I need to make him understand. I must protect Brynn. I must protect my son and my family. Bethany looked perplexed and tried to calm him down, but soon realized she couldn't. She looked long and hard in his eyes, while he rambled on about what he had seen in his eyes. Do you really believe Brynn to be in trouble now? She finally asked. And no. Not now. Once Robb and I and all my other siblings have died, he may be in danger. The gods showed me only one possible future. I don't think that it is set in stone, but they wouldn't go through all this effort if they didn't think it likely. He took a deep breath. In the future that I witnessed, he will die old and alone in battle. I saw him, Bethany, I saw his body. It spoke to me. It asked me for forgiveness and told me that he failed. I must prevent it. I must not fail him. He can't do this without me. Bethany looked at him, doubt clearly settling in his eyes. And the solution is in Winterfell. No, he shook his head. I need to go look for something at the north side of the wall. However, Robb needs to come with me. I saw Rookie die too, and his son and grandson. This is not about me or Brynn alone. It is about House Stark. The gods have given me a task. I cannot fail, Bethany. I cannot fail. You sound mad, husband. She simply replied. There is nothing north of the wall. There is something. It has to do with the direwolves. We need to find out. Where is my coat? My sword? I need to go. I need to go now. He almost screamed, as he looked around frantically for his sword. Bethany put her hands firmly on his shoulders and forced him to stop and look at her. Husband, do you truly think this is necessary? You said that it was only a possible future. Maybe it won't happen. Besides, do you really think that this could help our son in the future? He nodded. Not only our son. His children and their children too. I saw the whole of the north burn. Dead was everywhere. It has something to do with the guidance of the direwolves. They will help prevent ruin, how I do not know. I must do this, Bethany. She looked him in the eyes for a long time, before answering. Your bond with Summer is clearly magical, any soul can see that. It makes no sense. If you say that they are the key to protecting our son's life, I believe you. We will go to Winterfell. However, we will do it well. You look like a raving lunatic. I will ask the servants to pour you a bath. I will have other servants bring you your riding clothes right after, whilst I prepare the guard to accompany us to Winterfell. Us? He asked. You will not accompany me north of the wall, it is far too dangerous. She nodded. That much is true. However, I will go as far as Winterfell. If you and Robb are north of the wall, others might get stupid ideas. Moat Cailin is still too small to protect us properly. In Winterfell we will be safe, and Alis and her children can keep me company. If Rickon and Jon are present, they could protect us until you return. Besides, there is another reason to go to Winterfell. He looked to her in confusion. I talked to the Maester yesterday. I am pregnant again. I wanted to surprise you with the news today, but that plan has by now spectacularly failed. His eyes went wide, as he looked upon her belly. Instead of joy, he felt even more fear. This would be another child that could suffer a horrible fate, if he failed. He felt the panic rise but forced it down. He steeled himself. He looked upon his wife. Going to Winterfell is a good idea. Jon and Rickon can protect you, they have Ghost and Shaggy around them, and Arya and Nymeria are not far. Besides, it will do the child well to be born among my kin. He took a deep breath. I will not fail the three of you. I love you and Brynn, and I will love this new child just the same. However, now we need to hurry. You are right about that bath. If I arrive in Winterfell like this, Robb will think me mad, and it will not help us. We depart at midday, make sure you and Brynn are ready by then. I will arrange for the keep to be secured until our return. I will be back here for the bath in half an hour. He kissed her on her forehead and ran outside of their rooms, absently picking up the clothes he passed on his way to the door and loosely putting on pants and a tunic. He had work to do. All the while, Summer looked at him with a meaningful facial expression upon his face from the corner of the room. He made no sound, but he looked on with approval as he hurried outside of the door. 15 days later. Their pace had been slower than he had hoped for due to the unpredictable autumn weather and his young son's presence, but they were finally here. The great granite walls of Winterfell brought him a calm that he hadn't felt since he had had that dream. Even Arya's presence hadn't been able to cheer him up. His younger sister had hosted them in Castle Sewin the day before yesterday and had then joined them on their way to Winterfell. It had been months since she'd been in their ancestral home, the longest period she had ever been absent from it. Clee gave her more freedoms than a noble lady should ever aspire to have, but he had been adamant that their second child should be born in Castle Sewin. A good Sewin always should be, he had said. This had made it so she hadn't been able to travel the last 2 months of her pregnancy nor the first 3 months after her son's birth. Now, after almost 6 months she was going back home together with her 2 children. Her eldest, her son Meager, was 4 by now. Her second child was a daughter they had named Jonella, after Clee's sister who had been Arya's mentor. He had tried to be happy to meet his niece for the first time, as all his other siblings except for Sansa had already visited Arya and Jonella at Castle Sewin, but he just couldn't get his mind off the dream that he had had. Now that he had reached Robb, he finally managed to calm down a little. He rode his horse through the gates, as soldiers announced their arrival. He saw Robb walk into the courtyard with Rookie and the pain of the dream almost made him grasp for air. This happy 9-year-old boy had been the broken old man that he had seen die on the top of the keep he was just walking out with his father and Grey Wind. Alis was already waiting in front of them. When he got off his horse to greet her, his manners taken the upper hand for the moment. He bowed lightly in front of her. Good to see you, Bran. His sister-in-law smiled. However, why the sudden visit? We hadn't expected you back for months yet. I have something to discuss with Robb, it is urgent. He replied. So urgent that you couldn't send it by Raven. She joked, but when she saw his jaw clench tight, she seemed shocked. What is it, Bran? What do you need to talk about with my husband? It is something that is for Robb's ears only, Alis. Please excuse me, but I cannot tell you. He dismissed her politely, which he would normally never do. Nevertheless, these weren't normal times. The future of their dynasty and the North could be dependent on him convincing his brother to go north before winter fell. He walked over to his elder brother, who immediately gave him a hug. Welcome home, little brother. He told him. I must say that the new beard agrees with you. It will suit you well in the coming winter. Robb laughed happily. To what do we owe the unexpected pleasure of your return? Rookie laughed loudly at his father's antics, and he saw his mother roll her eyes at Robb because of it. I need to talk to you in private, Robb. It is urgent, I wouldn't have come all this way if it wasn't. A frown settled upon his eldest brother's forehead. May I at least greet the ladies and children in your company? I haven't seen Bethany and little Brynden in ages, and I would love to see our sister and her children again too. He relented and slowly nodded his head, as Robb and Rookie moved past him to greet the rest of the family. He looked starkly towards the place where the sun was hidden behind the clouds. It had already passed its highest point and it reminded him of the time that he would need to accomplish his task. He had never gotten a deadline, but he instinctively knew that the gods wanted him to be on the other side of the wall before winter came. I don't know what it is with him. He has been like this for the past 2 days and he won't budge on what the issue is. I suspect that Bethany knows, but she doesn't say anything either. He heard Arya tell Rob behind him. It didn't matter, he would know soon enough. He heard them talk among themselves for a few minutes, before Rob turned towards him. Let's get it over with, shall we? His brother sighed and he nodded in return. Rob gestured for him to go first. He needn't tell him where they were going. He knew the direction to his father's old solar like the back of his hand. Their direwolves went with them. He also saw his great-uncle silently walk next to Rob, as he led the way. That could be a problem. He had idolized the Tully Knight in his youth, and he still held him in the highest esteem. He had even called his firstborn after him, but now his presence would work against him. Sir Brynden knew about their warging, but it was still a foreign concept to him as the Tullys adhered to the Seven. His tale of a dream of the old gods telling him to go beyond the wall or risking the future of their kingdom and house would not go over well with him. For once in his life, he would find no ally in his beloved uncle. Once they reached the solar, he decided that he could not take the risk. "Uncle, would you mind guarding the door? I must talk to Rob alone." The old knight looked shocked at the proposal, as he almost always accompanied his king to his meetings. He knew it must hurt him for the words to come from him, as they shared a great bond, but he had no choice. He saw how the commander of the King's Guard exchanged a look with Rob, who had raised his eyebrows questioningly at him. "I won't budge on this, Rob. I must talk to you alone. Before we decide what to do, my words are for the head of House Stark only." His brother and uncle shared another look, but in the end both relented. "As you wish, Bran." The Blackfish sighed, as he took up position outside of the door. He followed Rob inside and the moment the door closed his brother turned around. "What is this about, Bran? I have never seen you dismiss our uncle that way. You apparently did the same to everybody else and you didn't even acknowledge Rookie's presence in the courtyard. Rob, have I ever asked you for anything? Have I ever wanted a reward, a favor or anything else?" He countered. His brother looked perplexed. "No, you haven't. Nevertheless, I have never forgotten you. You have gotten missions and tasks of high importance and I have given you the gateway to the north to govern." He nodded. That is all true and I am forever grateful. However, now I need to ask you for a favor. It may the only real thing that I ever ask of you, but it is of vital importance." The line of worry between Rob's eyebrows only thickened. "What is it, Bran? What do you need? Are you in trouble? Is your family well?" He shook his head. "I am not in trouble and my family is all very well, for now." The last words only thickened the line across Rob's forehead. "I need you to listen to what I am about to say. No matter how crazy I sound. No matter how far-fetched it is. I need you to listen and I will answer all your questions afterwards. Can you promise me that?" Rob looked him in the eyes for a few seconds, before he nodded and sat down behind his solar. He himself took the seat in front of him. "A fortnight ago, I had a dream about the old gods." Minutes later, Rob looked at him in shock. "You expect me to not only believe this, but to abandon my kingdom and family to march north of the wall with you?" That is what I am asking." He responded calmly. Now that he had delivered his message, he felt a rare calm even more so than when he had first spotted the walls of Winterfell and the direwolf banners displayed on top of them. His brother sighed. "I understand that it must have been hard to see your son and our family like that, Bran, but I am the king. You can't expect me to just go up and leave. I have a kingdom to run. Nobody even expected this. Jon is in Sea Dragon Point. Rickon is out with a dozen nobles visiting the mountain clans. Even Mother is away in Riverrun. She will depart it in a week to bring our young cousin to Winterfell to start his fostering under my tutelage here. I cannot leave." He looked his king hard in the eyes. "Then call Rickon and Jon back to Winterfell. Have Mother stay with young Hoster in Riverrun for a while longer or have them tour the Riverlands for a month or two. He is the heir to the Riverlands, it will only benefit him to do so with the mother of the king." Rob's face showed absolute shock. You are serious about this? I will never ask you anything else, but I need to ask you this, was his reply. Rob shared a look with Grey Wind, who sat next to him at his desk. I can't do it, Bran. You must forgive me, but I can't leave the kingdom on the cusp of winter. Jon is gone, so are Rickon and Mother. I can't leave. Maybe we can go there in a few years, when spring returns. He sighed. I didn't want to do this, Rob, but you leave me no choice. I hadn't told you the entire dream just now. His brother looked upon him questioningly. I told you that I saw people dying in battle wearing our family sigil, one of them being Bryn. Rob nodded. The others that I saw falling in battle were your grandson and great-grandson, Rookie's heirs. In an earlier flash I saw them next to your son when he held court for that woman in Winterfell. At the end, I didn't simply see Winterfell go up in flames. I saw Rookie standing on the highest tower of the keep, as the enemies poured over the walls with the castle going up in flames. I saw your son, who had lost his heirs, die from sadness and despair. I saw him lifelessly collapse on the ground, as the North and Winterfell burned around him, Rob. I believe that if we don't do this together that our house will face disaster. That your son will die an old and broken man. That is why I couldn't look at him in the courtyard. The gods specifically asked for you to accompany me. They showed me the fate of your heir's line. I don't believe this to be a coincidence. If you don't go north of the wall with me before winter, I believe that we are doomed. Rob's eyes went wide. You saw my boy die. He nodded. Winter is coming, Rob. These are our words for a reason. We cannot wait until spring and hope things blow over. That has never been the Stark way. Either you come with me, or you risk it all. There is no middle ground, no compromise, no easy way to do it. I don't know why the gods sent this to me and why they didn't contact you directly. I don't know, all I know is that we need to do this, together. He voiced his thoughts. I don't think that you were the only one that was contacted. Rob whispered. What? He almost screamed. A fortnight ago, possibly during the same night that you had yours, I had a dream of my own. It was completely dark, and a multitude of voices kept telling me things. However, I couldn't hear all they said. All I can remember, is the one sentence you also told me. The reforged line must not be broken yet. I thought it meant the line of Stark kings. I thought I was doing right. His older brother replied. He hunched forward, closer to his brother. Rob, do you really think this is a coincidence? The gods tried to contact you. Maybe, the connection wasn't good enough and they contacted me afterwards. Why or how I do not know. I have a good guess. You said it has something to do with the direwolves. Your control over summer was always stronger than mine over grey winds. Rob mused. Maybe these things are related. In the end, it doesn't matter. All that matters is whether you will accompany me or not. In that moment, Rob didn't look like a king, but like the teenage boy he had known in his youth. He had the same look upon his face as the time when Arya had been hurt in one of their games. He hadn't known what to do or how to tell Mother back then. The same look of indecision, shock and fear was etched on his face. In the end, it was Grey Wind that decided the day. The direwolf nudged his head against his companions and whined softly. Rob looked him in the eyes, and they seemed to have a silent conversation. He understood it immediately, as he had had many of those with Summer. The thought of it made him look at his own direwolf. Summer's golden eyes looked at him and brought him calm. He will accept. My brother will convince the Pax Alpha. He will guide him. He heard the familiar voice say in his head. For some reason, he knew it to be true. When he looked back to the scene in front of him, he saw Rob's shoulders fall in slowly. His head looked at his shoes and he took a few breaths before looking in his direction. Very well, Bran. I will accompany you north of the wall. I will write the necessary letters to the Night's Watch and the keeps between Winterfell and Castle Black to notify them of our arrival. His brother sighed. However, I will need your help. Jon and Rickon are away, and Alis can't run the kingdom alone. I will recall our brothers, but it might take weeks before they return. I will need to prepare the North for my absence and talk to the councillors on what needs to happen. I will need to pacify my lords too. They won't like the idea of me traveling to the other side of the wall, especially not this sudden. This will take all my attention and it could take a while. He nodded. I understand. What do you need me to do? I need you to establish a large company of men to accompany us. I have no idea how large or small you would want this group to be. However, you must keep in mind that I am the king. I have an image to think about, especially when I arrive to Castle Black. Most of the Black brothers are there because I banished them there. Arriving with 20 men would be suicide. You can ask Uncle Brynden for all the help you will need on that front. He will damn me to his 7 hells for this, but he will still accompany us. That is who he is. He agreed with that. Their uncle was nothing if not loyal and stubborn. I want trusted and experienced men for this, but I want Winterfell to remain safe. I leave my 5 children here. I don't want to be worrying about them when I have wildlings and other things to keep my mind occupied. I leave my wife and child here too, Robb. Winterfell will remain as strong and safe as ever. I promise you. He replied. Now you must excuse me. I have letters to write, and I need to talk to my wife. That is a conversation I am not looking forward to, so I better get it over with. He stood up and clasped his brother's arm. You are doing the right thing, Robb. Thank you. I know it must be difficult. The head of House Stark remained silent, his kingly mask safely worn on his face again. However, he knew his brother didn't feel as steadfast as he showed himself to be. Nevertheless, he knew Robb would get it done. He had never failed House Stark. He wouldn't start now. 7 weeks later. It had taken far longer than he had wanted, but they would finally be passing through the wall. They had been at Castle Black for 4 days now but hadn't been able to pass through due to a heavy autumn snowstorm. This morning it was clear, and everything was prepared for them to go. Their journey here had been interesting. Normally, the trip here would have taken around 18 days. Their journey had taken 2 weeks longer than that. Partially due to heavy snowfall, but also because Robb used the time to visit a few minor holdfasts on the way. He had listened to the grievances of the local people in the areas still directly sworn to Winterfell and had later listened to the minor nobles sworn to his vassals. The last few days they had been hosted by the Night's Watch. They had arrived with 180 men, which had given their former adversaries on the wall a pause. 100 elite guardsmen, all of them having battle experience. 5 members of the King's Guard with their squires, their own squires, a few dozen servants and craftsmen and Ned Umber and his retainers. Ned was the youngest son of the Great Yon and he had received parts of the lands of the former gift, on the condition that he and his line would still be sworn to last hearth. Due to his proximity to the wall, Ned had many dealings with the Night's Watch. The Great Yon had thought his presence would be helpful and had, in a secret letter, told them that he wanted the king to have more soldiers around him when dealing with the Watch. The new commander of the Night's Watch, Jason Lanny, had been a vassal of the Lannisters in Lannisport. He had been one of the last loyalists in that city and had personally been sent to the wall by Robb. In the end, their meetings were cordially enough. The former head of House Lanny was no idiot. He knew that House Stark was the biggest donor to the Watch. Ned Umber's presence also helped, as House Umber was the 3rd biggest donor after the Mandaealis. The southern kingdoms only trailing behind them. Although, donations to the wall had increased from the south, as many families in the Westerlands and Vale had responded to the pleas of their banished kinsmen. During the last years, the leadership of the Watch had luckily only changed a little. Duncan Big Little remained the first ranger, a great thing for the relations between the North and the Watch. He often voluntarily updated Robb on the workings of the wall, which created a lot of goodwill with his brother. In turn, Robb provided a lot of the things that Little asked for and as such the relations with the wall were well. Another Northman, Bowen Marsh, remained Lord Steward and Uthel Yarwick remained First Builder. The latter had delivered good work in rebuilding 4 keeps along the wall and laying the foundation to resettle and recultivate much of Brandon's gift. Lanny had kept much of Denys Mallister's capable old guard in place. However, every time a man died, he had been replaced him with one of the new men. A nickname given to the nobles that had been sent to the wall during the wars in the south. A thing that could be noted by the sheer amount of noble-born Reachmen, Westerlanders and rebel rivermen in positions of note in Castle Black. Lord Commander Lanny had promised Rob 10 rangers to accompany them on their task, although it had been clear that he thought that his brother had gone mad. Big Little had voluntarily chosen to lead the expedition. It would be impossible for 190 men to go north of the wall. Only 50 in total would going, the rest remaining in Castle Black under the leadership of Ned Umber. After having had breakfast with his brother, the King's Guard and a few of Brothers of the Watch, they had saddled their garrons. They rode through the gate and into the tunnel beneath the wall. Summer clearly didn't like it there, although he found the ice fascinating. Suddenly, they were on the other side. It looked nothing special. A large stretch of grass where all plants and trees were cut down around the wall and then further on a wall of trees, better known as the Haunted Forest. From a distance, the trees looked dark and menacing. The air was damp and cold, and he could see smoke every time he exhaled. He shared a look with his brother, after which both shared a look with their direwolves. Summer and Grey Wind seemed to think everything was all right, which was their sign to continue and enter the forest. Most of the Brothers of the Night's Watch scouted in a perimeter around them, whilst the direwolves did the same. They talked in hushed tones amongst each other. Nobody knew what they were looking for, not even him. All he knew was that this was where they were supposed to be. The brothers would first bring them to a weirwood grove a league from the wall and they would go from there. Rob looked at him and cursed softly. "I was supposed to tell you this at breakfast this morning, but I forgot. Here you go," he told him, as he gave him a letter that had been tucked away in his coat. "John arrived at Winterfell, Rookon did 3 weeks ago. Bethany added a small scroll for you to read." He accepted the raven scroll and saw the small wax direwolf on it. Next to it was the tree of House Blackwood, which was how she signed her personal communication. He opened the letter. "Dear husband, the baby and I are healthy. Brynden is safe and is having the time of his life with his cousins. I hope you find what you seek and quickly return to us. Your loving wife, Bethany." He smiled at the message. There hadn't been much room for her to write upon, but she had gotten all the important information across. Now that John and Rookon were home, he felt more at ease too. The old gods had told him something in his dream about the direwolves, and he felt as Winterfell would need ones in the future. Ghost and Shaggydog would do just as well as Summer and Grey Wind would. "How fares our little brother?" he asked. Rob sighed. "He has refused a total of 5 betrothals as of now. However, his behavior hasn't stopped. It is a miracle that no bastards have come of it yet." "Have you dealt with the problem with that clan chief?" he asked, remembering that Rookon had been found abed with the niece of a minor mountain clan chief only a few weeks ago. Rob nodded. "She doesn't seem to be pregnant, and Lord Cregan has accepted the monetary compensation I promised him for Rookon taking her virtue. That is good news. I still can't believe that he has been so reckless. He is 18 years old now, he needs to start acting like it," he replied. "I know." Rob sighed. "I tried to convince him to take a wife and settle down, but to no avail. Many of the nobles have come to call him the Wild Wolf, although our brother himself prefers the Wandering Wolf after our great-grandfather Roderick. Lately, I even heard talks of him considering going to Essos to follow in Roderick's footsteps. Many of the young nobles around him seem to be one for the idea." "Essos?" he asked him in shock. Rob nodded. "Wandering Wolf doesn't seem to be too far-fetched of a name. The only reason that he hasn't been outside of the north yet is because I had forbidden it until now, but I won't be able to stop him for much longer. He has seen almost everything there is to see in the kingdom, he has seen more of it than me and I am the king." He sighed as well. He loved his brother, but he could be a handful. "What about those marriage proposals? Which houses came forward?" "From the north. The Flints of Widow Swatch, the Locks, recently Clan Vulhas as well. Rookon wasn't interested. I tried to convince him with a comparison with how our great-grandfather Roderick took a Flint of the Mountains as a wife, but he wouldn't budge. He told me that Roderick had been 30 years old by the time he married, not 18. Rob told him, as he disapprovingly twisted his head. He rolled his eyes. That sounded like Rookon, all right. What were the other 2 proposals? They were far more interesting. Lord Jasper Riker sent an offer for his younger sister. Although Andal, She was partially raised by Lord Jasper's wife, Umber. She would take to the north far more easily than other southern women would. Rookon would have none of it. Lastly, there was a proposal from House Brune. It could have tied us to Cracklaw Point. Rookon's immediate response had been, well, it doesn't matter. What was his response? Rob sighed once more, as he gave in. If I would want a woman that has nothing more to give to me than rocks, sheep and salt water, then I would marry an Ironborn. He simply raised his eyebrows. That was crude, even for Rookon's standards. He looked towards the Blackfish, who was dutifully riding behind them. What do you think we should do with Rookon, uncle? Sir Brynden Tully apologetically raised his arms in the air. I am the last one that you should ask about what to do with a willful lad that is refusing a forced marriage, Bran. I have refused it myself and I have never regretted it. His sworn brothers chuckled at that. The story of the Blackfish had become legendary amongst the younger members of their Kingsguard. Many had asked themselves how he had gone from the spare of the Riverlands to the Knight of the Gate to the Lord Commander of the Stark's Kingsguard. His refusal to wed Bethany Redwine had become a legendary example of the old knight's stubborn character for them. Their conversation was suddenly halted, as the howl of a direwolf could be heard to the east. He looked to Rob. It's grey. He nodded. We make for the sound of the direwolf men, onwards. Their uncle already shouted, quickly understanding the situation. A few minutes later, they found themselves in a thick, overgrown part of the forest. The direwolves stood vigil, as the mauled bodies of 3 wildlings laid around them. A fourth one seemed to still be living, but he laid fearfully at Grey Wind's feet. Judging by the scent that hung in the air, he had lost control of his bowels a while ago. Duncan Little whistled loudly at the scene of scattered limbs and other body parts. The might of the direwolves. The stories don't exaggerate. These men stood no chance. Rob ignored the remarks, slowly riding towards the wilderling that was already being held up by 2 of their guardsmen. Speak, or you will share your friends' fates. Who are you and what are you doing here? My name is Soren. We were sent here to scout the entrance to Castle Black by Divin Beckloak. We saw your company leave the gate and chose to follow you. We meant no harm, I swear it. The frightened man, who seemed to be in his mid-20s, replied. Who is this Divin Beckloak? Rob asked. I can answer that, King Rob. Little answered. He is a local clan chief, whose people inhabit lands not so far from here. He has had many dealings with us rangers in the past. His folk don't like us much, but since the number of rangers has more than tripled, he does not have the strength to refuse us. Rob nodded at the first ranger in thanks. Go to this Divin Beckloak and tell him what you have seen here today. Tell him that the Stark is here and that if he tries anything else it will not be the Black Brothers that he will need to fear. We are not here for business with the free folk and will leave you be, if you do not disturb us. Now run, before I send my direwolf after you instead. The man's eyes went wide at the mention of their house's name, but he needn't be told twice. Not caring for any of his companions, weapons or provisions, he ran as if his life depended on it, which it did. Little tried to say something, but Rob held up his hand for a few seconds. Only when the wilderling was out of earshot did he allow him to speak. Why did you let him go? We could have used him for more information back at the wall. Rob replied calmly. Have one of your men follow him. You will have all the information you need and more. Little slowly smiled a dangerous smile and not much later, a ranger rode after the wilderling. They continued on their journey and quickly reached the clearing. In the grove, the faces of 9 painted weirwood trees looked at him. He dismounted and went to a knee, quickly saying a prayer to the gods. Most of the other men swiftly joining him. Only a few members of the Night's Watch stood aside, as they probably adhered to the 7. What now? The Blackfish asked, as he looked to him and Rob. He shared a look with his brother and in unison they replied. Now we wait. 3 hours passed and the members of the Night's Watch grew restless. They rode out to scout the area and rode back in always saying the same thing. There is nothing out there, what are you waiting for? None of them responded, they simply sat under the weirwood trees hoping for guidance. Suddenly, both Grey Wind and Summer sat up and looked around. They sniffed the air and after a small hesitation, they bolted away into the forest. That is what we were waiting for. We follow them, men," he shouted, as he quickly got back on his horse. Not waiting for Rob or their guards, he rode after Summer. They rode for a few minutes, but he did not stop. After a time, he had to slow down because he could have hurt his mount in the undergrowth otherwise. This had given the rest of the company the opportunity to catch up to him. His personal shield, Sir Benedict Blackwood, asked him if they had lost the way, but he shook his head. "They are in front of us, it is not far," he instinctively replied. The Kingsguard gave him a strange look but didn't respond. He had guarded him for almost a decade, he knew by now that he wasn't supposed to ask questions considering Summer. Suddenly, they entered a clearing. The midday sun, which had been unable to pierce through the trees, streamed blissfully on his face. In front of him, he saw direwolves playing in the grasses in front of him. However, there were not 2 direwolves. There were 4. Chapter 79, Foreign Relations. 19f. There is a 6-year time jump between this and last chapter. Keep that in mind. Rob. The warm morning sun shone unopposed through the rooms of his solar. He had moved himself into another chair so he could bath in its light when doing his work. It had been the longest spring in recorded memory. Usually, the in-between seasons were much shorter than winter or summer, but this spring had been going for 2 years already, after a 3.5-year winter. The winter had been harsh, but their preparations had been more than sufficient. In his own lands, they had lost far fewer people than they normally did. Although the effects of their work weren't as strong everywhere in the north, the general trend was the same. Less people, especially less children, had died. This was wonderful news and something that he and Alice were very proud of to have achieved. It was also one of the main goals of his reign to grow the native population. There was no better way to do that than to save the children from starvation and have them live long enough to make children of their own. The subject would be discussed more in the council meeting for this afternoon. Now, he was waiting on a peculiar guest. 2 days ago, a traveller from the Vale had arrived at his court. Sir Jeremy Tollet had arrived with a dozen companions and had asked for his hospitality. The younger brother of Lord Tollet was a known advisor of Sir Andrew Royce, the heir to Runestone, and he had known him during the war. The knight had asked for an audience on the first night that he had arrived, and he could be getting here any minute. He was interested in what the man would have to say. It was clear that it was important, but why Sir Andrew wouldn't come himself while his old and respected father still ruled Runestone he knew not. Not much later, a knock on the door was heard. Sir Edmund Grey of the Kingsguard opened it slowly. "Sir Jeremy Tollet is here to see you, your grace." "Very well, Sir Edmund. Let him in." The Vale Knight entered slowly. It was clear that he was a proud man, like many of his countrymen in the Vale. Yet, he remembered from the war that the knight shouldn't be underestimated. The man was around 10 years his senior and had a lot of experience in both war and the politics of the Vale. "Welcome, Sir Jeremy. Have a seat. I have had the servants prepare you some food and wine to make our talk easier." He welcomed him, with a gesture towards the chair and the food. "I thank you, King Rob." The knight replied gallantly. He took a seat in front of him and took a small piece of cheese and a glass of red wine. "Please, Sir Jeremy, free me from my curiosity. What brings you so far north?" The Valiman smirked. "I was sent here by my liege and friend Sir Andrew Royce in a diplomatic mission to you. Andrew fondly remembers the bond House Stark and House Royce have shared for over a century now and he wishes to honor it." "Honor it, you say?" "Yes, King Rob. He wants to again deepen ties with your house. That is why he sent me." The knight replied. He held up his hands for him to stop for a moment. If it's so important to him, why didn't he come here himself? His lordly father still rules over Runestone after all these years, which should give him the ability to come here in person, no? The Tollet knight smiled sadly. If he would have been able to come himself, he would have. Lord Yone, the Seven protect him, has seen his health decline steadily the last few months. Sir Andrew doesn't want everybody to know about how serious his condition is, but considering the purpose of my trip I guess he wouldn't mind me telling you if it stays between us. How bad is it? He inquired. Bad. He is bedridden for half the time now. He has already resigned his post on King Harold's council, which his grace has gracefully awarded to Sir Ander instead. Between the Ury and Runestone, my liege and friend saw no possibility of travelling to Winterfell in person, no matter how important this may be. I hope you will accept this. He sends his apologies. He waved it away immediately. No apologies needed. I understand completely. I am saddened to hear about Lord Yone. He was a great man and a great ally. Without him, the Vale would have never gotten its independence, and parts of the Vale might have even joined Cersei against me. I respect him greatly, as did my father before me. Kind words, which I will surely pass on to my liege. The Vale Knight replied. Now for the true reason that you are here. It must be something more specific than honoring the bond between our houses. What may that be? Sir Jeremy Tollett nodded. As you know from the war, Sir Ander had already been the father of 3 daughters during the war. He nodded and interrupted his guest. Have they made good marriages by now? He had certainly been told the news before, but it slipped his mind and he wanted to estimate House Royce's position immediately now that he knew of Lord Yone's failing health. Certainly, King Stark. House Royce has benevolently made alliances and bonds with houses that had long stayed neutral during the past conflict. The eldest has long married the heir to House Malcolm. Sir Ander's second daughter has married the new Lord Donijah. His third daughter married Sir Vardis Egan's heir just 3 years ago. All are happy and the Vale is more united for it. I am happy to hear it. He smiled. To come back to the heart of the matter. Sir Ander was blessed with 2 more children that survived early childhood after the war. Amongst them a son named Allard Royce, the future heir to Runestone. Young Allard is 14 years old now and has been squiring for Lord Jasper Redfort for the past 4 years. The experienced knight took a deep breath and looked solemnly at him. It is for him that I am here. Sir Ander wishes for me to negotiate a betrothal between one of your daughters and his heir. He is asking for a marriage alliance between houses Stark and Royce, as has happened twice before over the last century. He smiled at the last remark. I am pretty sure that the marriage of my ancestors Berne Stark and Laura Royce has been more than 100 years ago by now, but your point remains valid. Sir Jeremy bowed his head to apologize, but a small smile also crept on his face. Nevertheless, my liege wants to formally renew these bonds. Which of my daughters were you thinking about? I expect that you are talking about Sara or Birina. Tollett nodded in response. They are still very young. Sara is only 12. Whilst Birina has yet to celebrate her 11th birthday this year. He remarked. Such early betrothals weren't unheard of, but he wasn't a personal fan of the idea. Especially not for his darling girls. That would depend on your discretion, King Stark. In the Vale, we have no knowledge of any secret betrothals that you have made for them, but your first daughter's marriage came as a surprise to us as well. For this reason, Sir Ander found it better to keep an open mind on the subject. He also said that you might prefer one of your girls to remain in the north and would trust your judgment on which of them would fare better in the Vale. I have been strictly informed that the young Allard would be grateful for a bride of such prestigious lineage as yours. He will not mind waiting 2 more years to get married, if you decide upon the younger of your middle daughters. He nodded along with this explanation. The offer was well brought, but the political implications of it all were clear. Lord Yone had been the second most powerful man in the Vale for over 15 years. Sir Ander was capable and well respected, yet he wanted to use a betrothal between his heir and House Stark as a show of strength of House Royce for future generations. He told the Tollett Knight as much. He simply smiled. Ander told me not to underestimate you, it seems he was right. You don't become king from the Wall to the Blackwater without acknowledging political realities, Sir Jeremy. He shrugged. So, it seems. The knight laughed good-naturedly. How does the political reality look for House Royce in the Vale with the other houses and their alliances there? What marriage relations do they have now? Oh, and I would advise you not to lie to me. My advisors will know everything I want to know, I just want to hear it from you. House Royce enjoys very good relations with most of the Vale. The houses that allied together to depose the false Lord Robert are still closely knit together. Amongst them, House Royce is closest to houses Waynwood and Redfort. Sir Ander's youngest sister is married to Roland Waynwood, who became the head of his house 3 years ago after the death of his grandmother Lady Anya. As mentioned before, Allard himself is squiring for Lord Jasper Redfort, and Sir Ander often visits there on his way from and to the Eyrie. My liege is even in advanced conversations about a betrothal of Allard's younger sister to the Redfort heir at the moment. I am certain that those will have concluded by the time I have returned. He signalled for the Vale Knight to continue. Marriage alliances have been reached with houses Melcombe, Donijah and Egan through Sir Anders' adult daughters. His beloved sister Uzilla is the Queen of the Vale and mother to the Crown Prince and the other royal children. His eldest sister, Rhyla Royce, was once married to Sir Erwood Free. After the fate of her children, she had secluded herself in a convent of Sisters of the Seven for years, albeit without ever taking the vows. A few years ago, she found love with a knight of the Royce household, and they live happily and secluded in a small holdfast on the coast with their 2 boys. He listened closely to all the information. The last